All right, we're live, man.
Hell yeah.
How you doing, Jamal?
Doing good. How about yourself?
Doing great, man. Thanks for coming.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
it.
me.
Absolutely, man. We were talking before the podcast, but before we jump into any of that shit, tell people who you are and what you do, just in case they don't know.
Jamal Carlson. I play bass. I've been playing in the Twin City area for about 20 so years. Mostly known for the band Emergent.
Recently, mostly known.
Yeah, right.
Because you were pretty well known for a bunch of different bands
yeah.
throughout the time.
I'm a dinosaur here.
But that band is definitely probably, would you agree, probably the most successful one you've been in?
Oh, absolutely. Like, hands down.
How do you measure success being a musician? Because this is a pretty arbitrary thing that we all define differently.
Well, it certainly wasn't about finances. I guess I would measure it by, feedback and the people showing up to shows and eagerly awaiting everything, from CDs, new songs dropping, just getting that feedback from people. That's what makes it, I think, real.
Yeah. I would agree with that. For the most part, I think ultimate success for me, it's a lower bar than a lot of people. I don't think you got to sell 1 million records and go platinum in order to call it. For me, it's like, can you pay your bills? Are you able to raise a family making music? Then you're successful.
Oh, I totally 100% agree. If you're doing something you like and you can financially survive on it, it's successful.
Yep, that's where it's at, 100%.
And I think, Emergent certainly could have done that. I think we were at that level where we definitely could have done that.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys had some issues with Aaron. I mean, we're not breaking any news here. This is really old news. He basically, kind of the classic musician's trope of so many fucking bands, just decided to get more serious about his family and felt like being on the road specifically was taking away from that, correct?
That's absolutely true, yeah. And that, that's a decision that everybody has to come to at some point in their
and he's
life.
not necessarily wrong.
No, there's
by any means.
There's no right and wrong in this situation, and the way I look at it is I had the honor and privilege of being in a band with those guys.
Yep.
And
you guys aren't done. You're just not moving full time.
No,
correct?
I think we're done. I mean, who knows? It might be something where we 2 years from now, I'll be like, oh, let's do a show or something.
Right, and never say never.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. That sucks because that was a great band, man. Aaron's a phenomenal singer. I wish that... oh, shit, I forgot to turn that light on. Hold on. I knew something was off.
No, Aaron's definitely the best, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he's definitely up there as far as especially here locally. He's definitely one of my favorite. Ironically, Boyd was telling me Jeremy, fucking Montoya.
Yep.
That's Aaron's favorite singer.
Oh, really?
Locally,
that's cool.
Is Montoya.
Yeah.
And I was
like him too. I like him too.
Cool.
Yep.
Yeah, he was a beast in Wither the Tide and Buried by Hope. He's jamming on my project with me.
That's awesome.
I've got some demos. I like what I'm hearing. I think it could be really cool. Hopefully we get our shit together in the next few months. I'm probably going to have to just resolve to the fact that no matter what happens, we're not playing live till at least next summer. And I'm not doing indoors right away either.
Well, regardless of the predicament with the pandemic, it's probably, you take your time anyway. Make sure everything's solid before you get out there and make that first impact strong.
That's true. That's a good point.
But yeah, how I feel about this pandemic stuff, and I think
tough,
people should be playing shows. Be out
tough,
there,
dude. At least during the summer, allow them to do the outdoor ones, because the biggest fucking horse shit of this whole thing is how legitimate media sources were saying it's okay to protest for Black Lives Matter and police brutality, but it's not okay to protest for the government shutdown or mask laws or any of this other shit. And what they were saying by okay is they were saying if you're at this type of protest or mass gathering, you're not at risk for spreading the disease. But if you're at this type of protest or mass gathering, you are at risk. So it was like, you can't go to church, you can't go to your Trump rally, you can't protest the government for X, Y, and Z, but you can go to this event, this event, this event, and this convention if they were open, right? They just didn't do them. And on top of that, like, and you can go to these protests for protesting government for A, B, and C. And one's a risk factor, one's not. And it was like, come on, they either all are or they're not. You know?
I agree. We've reached a whole level of absurdity. I mean, honestly, I would never have been able to predict, you know, and if you've known me and my stuff, I've been trying to predict what's going to happen 20 years down the line for 20 years, you know. Mm-hmm. But I would have never predicted it would get this absurd.
I kind of did, actually. Not that far out, right? But the fears definitely came true. For example, let's go back 20 years. Let's go back to a fun American pastime that we refer to as 9/11, right? Patriot Act gets passed.
Sure,
They promised us Department of Homeland Security would never be released on American citizens on American soil. They would never do that. Well, whether it's justifiable or not, you've got Antifa and Black Lives Matter supporters being rounded up by Department of Homeland Security. That is exactly what people were afraid would happen. They promised us it wouldn't happen, and now that's exactly what is happening. It took 20 years for that bill to show its actual impact on what happened. Think about the 1994 crime bill. That if there is systemic racism, if there is fucking all these other institutional problems, it's because of the 1994 crime bill. And that shit didn't happen overnight. That shit didn't happen by 2001. That shit took 20 fucking years. It was around 2012 to 2014 during the Obama administration when we started noticing these serious problems with police brutality. Like, it takes a while for these things to go into effect. Right. And so I don't know if I could say I predicted that kind of shit, but that was definitely our fear.
Right.
But is what I did fucking predict, almost to an exact, perfect biblical prediction, right? Like biblical proportions, I mean. Right. The only thing I got wrong is where it happened. But I literally said when they announced the shutdown, I said, number one, this is not going to be 2 weeks. This is going to go on for months. Millions of people are going to lose their fucking jobs. The government's probably not going to get the fucking economic stimulus thing figured out in time and in place properly. Some fucking black guy, some guy who's just, he got lost in the system, right? So he's like a bartender or a musician, or he's in some sort of mostly cash deal that got shut down. He's not on unemployment. He's kind of fucked. He's going to get caught stealing food, and some fucking cop's going to kill him. And it's not going to be a normal protest. It's going to be fucking riots in the streets. And it's going to spread throughout the fucking country because people are going to be restless and they're going to be desperate. I just didn't think it would be in Minneapolis. And I didn't think it would be, when I said stealing food, it was a $20 bill to buy food. Like, he wasn't in there buying smokes with the $20 bill. I think he went in for like a loaf of bread and like some other shit. So, yeah, and I got more predictions for you guys. It doesn't matter who wins in November.
But people thought I was batshit crazy, you know, when Bush and the Patriot Act and all that stuff started. But, you know, it's all ramped up, all this, you know, warrantless spying on citizens and the drug war. Yeah. That's all that stuff is, all that terrorism. Terrorism laws have all been basically steered towards the drug war.
Yep.
And of course, as long as that happens, you're going to have more interactions with people and more interactions with cops and civilians. Is going to result in more chances of something going overboard, and you're going to have an incident like this that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just going to increase tenfold. You know, every time we can't get past. You know, we can't get past any of this stuff if we keep ramping up these laws that create these interactions with police and citizens.
Yep.
I mean, it's just going to brew contempt and an us versus them, gang, group versus group mentality.
Yep. And it's already at that point. Like, and I mean, I know a lot of right-wing Americans who have felt like it was us versus the government for years.
Yeah.
Like, like that's not a new mantra. The difference is that mentality is now spreading into every corner of all American communities. Everyone feels like they're getting fucked by the government. The crazy thing is, like, black people and minorities and what protected groups, I guess you could say, so like trans and all the other, basically anybody who's not a straight white dude. They're like, yeah, we're being oppressed by the government. And here's the thing is, like, almost every white dude I know who didn't live in the cities, right, has been like, the government's been fucking me for years.
Right.
Whether it's taxes or fucking regulations or this, like, the government has always been trying to fucking keep people down. Like, we've called him the man for years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this is nothing new. Y'all are just now feeling it. So I don't know if, like, people are waking up to the problems, or if they're just now being affected by the problems, or I don't know what it is.
I don't know. I see everybody doubling down on their team, their guy. They still want government, but they just don't understand, like, that 94 crime bill. It probably wasn't really. I mean, obviously, it helps the prison industrial complex, right? Those kind of bills, but generally, the end result was not intended.
Right.
But that's the problem with government, is regardless of what the intention is,
yep,
you're going to get a different result.
Yep.
You're going to get that result, and it might not show for 20 years, like you said. But yet, most of my friends die hard, support this bill and support that bill, and want government to do something. The answer is always, government needs to do something. Government needs to do something, even though time after time the end result is worse.
Yeah, it always is.
Yeah.
Like, the government has never come in and made anything better, except for the only thing I agree with government intervention on is certain regulations. And a great example of that, and I'm not trying to put you in a box here. You're super libertarian, right? But I also know that you're super down with, like, wildlife and nature and hunters and that kind of shit, right?
Right.
Here's the best example, because the issue why I can't truly identify as libertarian is because they're a little bit too anarchist for me. And here's the best example: the fucking DNR, dude. Like, you know exactly what I'm going at now. As soon as I say the DNR, you're like, oh, fuck, I know, because I have a point here. And all the libertarians have to admit it. If you're a hunter, if you're a fisherman, you've seen trash in the lake, and people are fucking disgusting. And we do need some basic government regulations to literally curb and de-incentivize people from exploiting the natural resources, including other people. Right? So, like, putting mass amounts of pollutants into a river. People are like, oh, fucking, no, let the people figure it out. The market will sort it. No, it won't.
Well,
we know that won't happen because they already did it.
This is my rebuttal to...
when corporations give towns cancer.
Yeah.
And it takes the government to come in and be like, no, you knowingly dumped those chemicals in that pond. You have to take care of those people. The government's the only one with the power to do that.
Here's my rebuttal to that, though. Because it is, being a libertarian, I do realize there's a lot of touchy subjects that's really hard, that even I don't like people just having free reign to go do whatever they want because they may do something that adversely affects somebody else. But at the same time, is like, so for instance, if you look at, like, the DNR, you look at, like, government wildlife preservation agencies and stuff like that, just Google how many animals per year they kill.
Yeah, I mean,
millions and millions of animals. You look at, like, even the EPA has caused pollution. The government's one of the largest polluters in the world. So on one hand, you have some help, right? The government's coming and making things better, right? But at the same time, they're sometimes guilty of the very exact same things that they're trying to stop.
I don't think they ever make anything better, but sometimes when properly implemented, like the DNR, they're helping mitigate a problem from getting worse, and, like, we fund that not even through tax dollars. Like, the Minnesota DNR is paid for through our lottery. That's a gambling thing, and it's also paid for by hunting licenses and fishing.
And if now, obviously I think taxation is theft, so especially things like property tax and income tax and things like that, estate tax. But if you're going to tax something, and this probably will give me some heat from libertarians, if you're going to tax something, have it be a use tax.
Sure.
So you're not just taxing everybody,
right?
Who's who may never even set foot there or whatever, right? To me, that's the least amount of force. If you say I believe in the non-aggression principle, right? And obviously, if you want to solve a problem, you use the least amount of force to solve that problem. That's what that stands for, right? So, to me, the taxation, if you need to fund things, if you need to have a government, then you would do it in ways that you would use things, like whether it's tolls or some other form. You're using that, then that's what. Instead of saying, hey, everybody owns a house, you have to pay for, you have to pay property tax.
Right.
These other people get the same benefits, but they don't have to pay that same tax.
That's a great example, too, specifically the property tax thing, because your property taxes are collected by the county, and they are supposed to pay for two things, which is ironic, but they're supposed to pay for your local police, which doesn't just mean your sheriff, right? Which is an elected position. It also funds your city police. So the city of Minneapolis funds that through not just sales tax and that shit. The majority of that comes from Hennepin County, which is collecting on my property taxes, and then the fucking schools. Right? But now they're not doing schooling, right? The kids are at home, okay? They're talking about defunding the police and getting rid of the cops. Okay, then where the fuck are my property taxes going? Give me my money back then, motherfuckers, because you're still taking my money and you haven't fixed any of these problems. In fact, in those two examples, you've probably made everything worse, right? The Minneapolis cops are one of the worst police departments in the country. And I'm not saying that because of some fucking BuzzFeed article I read.
Right.
I'm saying that because I've fucking experienced it. Like, you go to most of our suburbs, you're not going to experience the same type of cop. They're normal human beings. They're good cops. Like, except unless you get to there's a couple of them. Like, I've heard Burnsville's pretty bad.
I've never been in trouble in my life, but I've had some bad interactions with Minneapolis police officers.
Yeah, and sometimes they're just fucking dicks. Like, you can just tell they're looking for a fight. You go to ask them a question like, hey, man, where the fuck I'm lost, dude. Where is this? And they're like, get the fuck out of here. And it's like, whoa, dude, like, this isn't Baghdad. Like, you're not a fucking sentry, you know what I mean?
To me, my issue is the fishing, right? Pulling over cars, fishing for something, right?
Finding a crime, where there isn't one, or maybe there is.
I've had an interesting, unique car where I had some friends put all kinds of crazy, a spoiler that from a Fast and Furious car on like an old LeBaron. I mean, weird stuff right? And then had me pulled over by the cops and them tell me, well, your car matches the description.
It's like, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. This car, you've not seen this car before.
It's like saying, I'm driving the Scooby-Doo van and it fits a description.
Yeah.
No, it fucking doesn't. There's only one of these.
Yeah, they just, just looking. And that's part of that is the drug war, right? So dude, that's what they're really looking for.
Yep. Yeah, and dude, it's just sad because they're going back to the DNR thing, we know people will exploit or just be lazy and fuck up things for everyone, right? Now, I'm not as big of a fan of the EPA because I think a lot of their things are well-intentioned, but also, not very well thought through. And who they protect, when and where, and for what reasons seems very suspect.
There's some insider gaming going on there.
Right. Whereas the DNR, I think, is a much better example because
of a service,
I've never heard of a hunter or a fisher bitching about paying for their license. Not one. We're happy to pay for our fishing license or our hunting license.
And it's actually affordable.
Yeah, that's the other thing is it's affordable. And at least here, it's incredibly effective. Our DNR kicks fucking ass. And they also don't exploit their power. For example, the Fishing and Game Commission in California, basically their DNR, makes a lot of dumb fucking rules and laws. You can't hunt the coyotes or the fucking mountain lions, but you can't do anything about them, right? And the government won't do anything to control them, but they'll fucking regularly eat your fucking animals right out of your yard. small dogs, cats, pets, fucking just slaughtered, and the government won't do anything
I
about
think
it. But you're not allowed
I think
to do
what the
anything
government
about
does
it either.
there is, I think what the government does there is they hire an outside person to come and regulate that stuff. So
They're supposed to,
right?
but they don't.
Yeah,
At least not enough, and they should just give those tickets out to the citizens because the citizens know that land. You know,
Right.
that Texas does the same fucking thing. You're not allowed to hunt wild boar in Texas, but they'll hire a company to come in, and these motherfuckers fly in a helicopter and just slaughter them from the sky with fucking high-powered machine guns. And it's like, that's the most unethical shit I've ever seen in my life.
It's pretty brutal.
Like, that's
yeah.
horrible. Just give the guys their fucking permits, and they can go feed their families for a year. You get some more money, because I guarantee you, if you gave everybody a ticket, and hunting, we say tickets, it's a ticket. I'm not talking about like a speeding ticket. If you give everyone a ticket, $50, and you can go get one hog, that's a lot more money coming in to the system than your local government hiring somebody for $5,000 to go murder them from the sky, and then you have a bunch of fucking carcasses spreading diseases. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like, in that case, certain people in DNRs don't make the right call. I'm just using Minnesota's DNR as an example because, like, our fucking lakes and rivers are clean comparatively to other places. None of our hunting and fishing community complains about the DNR being like oppressive, or, you know, everything our DNR does is extremely reasonable, and they get their money through a usage fee, which is your permit, your fucking license, and then the lottery, which I think is a great way to fund that.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? Instead of pulling it from property taxes or income taxes.
And it's voluntary.
Exactly. And there's got to be better ways of doing that, because you brought up something earlier about like making it voluntary, or at least putting it on the end user. And that's where I've always held the belief of, like, I feel we hear taxation is theft, but I feel like income tax is a punishment for working and making money. If anything, get rid of all income tax, federal and state, and turn it in, like, increase sales tax a little bit on certain items. Again, Minnesota does it really well. There is no sales tax on food or clothing. If you did that across the nation, right? So now nobody pays taxes on essential things they need to live, but you increased a sales tax to, let's say you added a 2% national sales tax to every transaction across the board. Rich people won't notice that when they go buy their Maserati. It's not going to make a difference to them. And when you go buy your PlayStation as a normal middle-class American or lower-class American, that 2% on $400 is still inconsequential. But you add that up over the millions of the biggest buying market in the world, I guarantee you there's a way. Maybe it's 3%, maybe it's 4%, but I guarantee you there's a way where you would actually give people more money, increase their quality of life, and increase revenue, because we know we need a military, right? We know we need some funding. I agree taxation is sort of theft, because if you don't pay it, you're literally held at gunpoint and put in a cell.
Right.
Unless you're super high-end white collar, and then you fucking just pay the fines and walk scot-free, but that's a whole different problem. We'll save that for a different podcast. But it's kind of a fucking conundrum, because we know we can't do nothing. We already did that experiment. We had the Wild West.
Well, I think the money is there. So, I mean, if you look at how much, like, for instance, like Black Lives Matter, go look at how much money they can raise, right?
Right.
I mean, the money's there.
True.
The cause is there, and people believe in the cause.
That's true, even now, in an economic crisis.
The money is there.
You're right.
So if we could somehow figure and prioritize, but see, the thing is, we, you know, in some indirect way, we're not really guided to prioritize correctly.
Right.
Because we're, no matter what, there's a safety net,
Yep.
so we can take more chances, right?
Yep.
You know, there's nothing that's teaching us how to prioritize anything. There's no incentive.
Right.
Because government's there,
Yep.
right? And I believe that if some of those safety nets were out of there, and then real life would get real to some people.
Give people an example what you mean by a safety net. Just pick one random example so we can put a context to this.
To be
analogy.
No matter what, say you lose your job, no matter what, you got money, food, money for shelter, money for healthcare, money for everything. There's literally a program for everything, right?
For some people.
Well, it depends
in
on,
certain
like, if you
places.
don't have money, if you're broke, you qualify for a lot of this stuff, right? Obviously, I don't know who falls through the cracks. There's always going to be people that fall through the
Sure.
cracks. There's no perfect system, right?
Fair.
But I think that when that shit becomes really real to people is when they really got to face it, right? And so if there's always a safety net, you can be irresponsible and live paycheck to paycheck and not prioritize and put away 10% into a savings, or not, for instance, Social Security, depending on that to retire or
Right.
something. You know, there's all these things that kind of tell us like, oh, well, we'll be all right,
Sure.
right? And we kind of don't prioritize with our resources. And I think that if we did have the correct priorities, like taking care of your families and stuff like that, that we would be in a much better place.
Mm-hmm.
Because think about like how expensive putting people in old folks' homes is. I mean, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at people other, like, let's say people that come to America from other countries that still have a strong family structure, where grandma stays home with the kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's always somebody there to watch kids. You're not paying for the daycare.
Right.
You're also not paying for grandma to be in a home somewhere, right? Which is expensive.
Right.
And so I think all the answers are, if you really, I mean, shit gets real when you really have to deal with a problem.
Right.
And I think the farther we remove ourselves from personal responsibility in dealing with those particular problems, the farther we are removed from that, the more likely we'd be just likely to push it off on government, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know if I explained that good, but
I mean, I think there's some truth there, because when you're literally incentivized monetarily to rely on the government, and this is the thing, is like, there's different examples of this too, because I've heard this recently about the $600 stimulus. You know, a lot of people are like, well, you can't give people that much money because then they have no incentive to go back to work. And it's like, that's not really the point. The point is to give me enough spending power in the economy to help other businesses stay afloat, regardless of whether I'm working or not. Like, for example, I've said this on the podcast before, so I apologize if you guys have heard this before. I'm sorry. It just means you like the podcast and you watch it. But not everybody has, so not everybody's heard this. Point being is, like, at that extra $600 a week, me and Kate were actually just making a little bit more than what we were making at our jobs full time. Is what that did for us is it allowed us to live our normal lives and continue to spend a normal, healthy amount of money to keep the economy stimulated. But it also gave us a little bit extra money to eat out more, because we're not well off. We're lower middle class. Like, I mean, we make decent money. We're not struggling by any means, but we're not balling. Like, we really have to budget in a normal world, in a normal scenario. We really have to budget and take care of shit, and it takes a long time to save money up and, you know, remodel part of the house or go on vacation or whatever. We are able to do those things, but it takes a long time. With the stimulus money, is what it was able to do is we could go out once or twice a week in the shutdown and support Stanley's by ordering curbside to go, or Psycho Susie's, or El Taco Riendo, or these little local places that we really loved to go to, but we could really only do it once or twice a month before the shutdown, right? So when everything was fine, we could still only do it once or twice a month. Then I got that extra stimulus money. It was like, those businesses are struggling more than ever. So now I got a little extra cash to spread around. And no, I don't need this shit, but that's not the point. The point is I'm going to try to, like, help the economy locally stay afloat. And now, even just dropping it down to the $400 a week, now we are making less money than we did full time, if we even get that $400 a week. And now I actually need to budget even stronger and more stringent than we did pre-shutdown. So now not only am I able to go out to, or I'm not only am I no longer able to go out to Psycho Susie's or those other places once or twice a week, we're not even going to be able to do it once or twice a month like we did beforehand. So now you're going to see even more businesses collapse. You're going to see even more small businesses. And this isn't because of anything other than the government shut down the economy. And the like you said, there's unintended consequences, and the longer that shutdown goes without them fucking literally printing money, that's the only solution right now. You have two choices. You either open the whole thing wide open, right, and you still have to provide unemployment, because just because you open it wide open today, it still could be 6 to 9 months before my job comes back, because those businesses are gone now. Okay, you gave them the right to reopen, but they went bankrupt. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to just bounce back either. So you either got to keep that flow of money going in order to keep the economy even just afloat.
Well, and the scary thing is, though, is who pays for all this?
Back up. Yeah, I mean, we are.
Or grandkids or whatever. I mean,
yeah, that's the scary thing. But honestly, at this point, we have to just figure that out. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
But we got to stop.
We got to get to the point where our kids can deal with it. You know what I mean? That's how bad the shutdown's getting economically.
Dealing now with our second administration with massive bailouts.
Third.
So is this
third?
Is the new? I don't know.
Bush did a big one. Bush did the huge one. Remember with like Enron and fucking those companies and the Wall Street bailout. He did that, and then, he did the big corporate bailout after 9/11. And then Obama did the fucking Wall Street collapse, and I think Bush was also in on Enron.
Yeah.
And now Trump's doing this one, yeah.
So this is, to me, is this the new normal, right?
Yep.
Every administration, we double, triple our debt, and then also do massive bailouts like this.
Do you remember when we were kids and they would say, like, they do the polls of like, this is what the voters, this is their biggest concern, and it was like national debt, war, education, the economy, jobs. Now it's just economy. Like, people our age and younger don't even know to bring up our national debt as a problem, our spending as a problem. It's not even a subject people talk about. They just go, because the number one thing on everyone's worry, and this was in the last election, this was before the shutdown, coming up to this election, economy. No matter who you talk to, the economy is doing bad or it's doing great, but it's still everyone's number one concern. That doesn't make any fucking sense.
Exactly. And any criticism on, like, for instance, I think one of the biggest problems we have of all things is the hypocrisy of people. And obviously, everybody cares about the economy, but they do not care to enforce their own party's side and how they handle the economy, right? Yep. It's always the other side's fault, no matter what. And both sides are quickly trying to, race to the bottom, as far as I'm concerned, with the economy.
There used to be I agree, and there used to be a huge groundswell from the GOP my entire life, where it was all about small businesses. Small businesses are the backbone of the American economy.
But look who was getting the small business loans is Boeing and everybody else. Are these no contract bids?
Yeah,
or these,
exactly. And it's like, so what the fuck happened? Because that seemed to disappear. Because I do remember Bush talking about George W. In the 2000s. I remember him still preaching that mantra. I don't hear fucking anybody from the GOP nowadays talking about small businesses. And I don't hear the DNC really talking about it either as a whole. I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule. There always is. But that's gone out of the wayside too.
Personally, I think Trump is such a huge figure that he's basically ahead. Like, he's blocking us from paying attention to what's going on with the rest of the GOP, right? Like, he's such a distraction.
Sure.
So, like, for the first time, for me, I do pay attention to this stuff a lot, but to me, even I find a hard time keeping up with everything because, one side, particularly the left or the liberals, super, super loud and super, aggro on everything, right? And then you have Trump, who adds fuel to the fire, right? So then I kind of ignore what's going on in the rest of the Republican Party because I don't see.
Right.
It's not pushed to my face every 2 seconds.
It's like trying to see past the bonfire.
Right.
You really, like, when you're in an open field and you're all partying and shit, you can't see past the fire.
Right. And I think most of us, almost all of us are like that. Either people are so fixated on just Trump, or they're fixated on the Liberal Party. To me, it's hugely distracting from any kind of attempt at fixing any problem. Because to me, I haven't seen anything that
Yeah.
indicates anything's going to get fixed.
Well, and for me, like, I don't even like calling them the Liberal Party anymore because I don't think they're liberal.
Right. Well,
I don't think they're liberal at all because I'm liberal as fuck, but I'm not a liberal, and I'm not a liberal because that is apparently the Liberal Party.
Right. Yep.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's the same thing. Like, I'm also conservative.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
I'm conservative as fuck when it comes to the government infringing on individual civil liberties, but I'm not a conservative because what a conservative now is, that's not
Well, that
me.
was also liberal.
Right.
So
right. That
you know,
exactly. That's the point.
Yeah.
Is that's why I'm liberal is
Yep.
because of what is now looked at as conservative beliefs, or vice versa. However you want to look at it, it's
Right.
like, no, I don't want. That's why I support the trans community and trans rights. It's because I don't believe in the government being able to come in and tell you what you should do with your own body, like, which is also principally why I have to default to pro-choice. Because whether I believe it's a human being and a baby and it's murder or all that, it's such a gray area. It's like, I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to carry a child. I don't know any of those situations. It would almost be arrogant for me to tell a woman what should be ethical or legal. Now, I'm not saying I don't have the right to an opinion.
Right. Yep.
I'm saying that my opinion probably shouldn't become law and affect other people's lives.
Well, my issue,
Those are liberal philosophies, though.
I never really weigh in on the abortion thing because I mean there's two sides of that, right? There's the mother's body, right?
Right.
And then there's the child.
Yep.
And so if we have to say, okay, who are we protecting here, right?
Yep.
But in like a true libertarian society, or maybe a society where we leave each other alone,
Yep.
we're not in each other's business. How do we know somebody had an abortion to enforce such laws?
Correct.
Right? How do you enforce those kind of laws?
You have to, in order to, you nailed it, because that's how the Trump administration, first of all, that's how the abortion bill, really not even a bill, the verdict got passed in the first place, is they decided that because it was a medical procedure and you have the right to privacy between you and your doctor, what happens between you and your doctor is none of the government's business. We agree with that in principle, right?
Right.
Because of the libertarian philosophy. That's how the Supreme Court got around it with the Trump thing, and in these certain states, is because they're saying, no, we do have the right to know what goes on between you and your doctor. To me, that's fascism.
But they
Because
want to
that's-
regulate every single aspect of your life, including what kind of medicines you and your doctor describe.
But think about
decide
this.
you're going to take.
But think about this. The GOP is so hung up on the idea of protecting the baby that they're violating privacy laws that are protected in the Constitution to regulate your life.
Correct.
This is
Yep.
the opposite of what the GOP stood for when we were kids. This is what I'm getting at. That's not small government anymore. That's fascism. That's exactly what the fucking Nazis did. Oh, we found out your medical records show that you have fucking polio. Euthanized. Boom.
Yep.
This is how we prevent government tyranny. But when I say this, people think I'm fucking insane. And it's like, no, again, let's go back to the Patriot Act. It took 20 years. So when you have, and then you have a Democratic senator in South Carolina talking about they let these deformed babies be born, and then they have a conversation between the mother and the doctor, and they keep the baby comfortable. They keep the baby alive, right? And then they decide if it's a viable fetus. And if not, they then kill the baby and harvest its organs. That's atrocious. And people go, dude, no, that's just the beginning of this version of the Patriot Act. That's just the beginning of what we're seeing with government fucking, now that they've violated personal privacy. And this is the GOP. This is Trump's party. This is Kavanaugh here. This is the guy that we're talking about. Nope, we're going to go ahead and we're going to violate your right to fucking privacy between you and your doctor. Now they have the constitutional and legal precedents to go after free speech, to go after guns, to go after all these things. And I've always said, my problem is not with the guy currently passing the law.
Yep.
It's who's going to come later. In this case, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, openly against us having guns, openly tyrannical. Kamala Harris wanted to jail parents for their children's truancy violation, and then laughed about that shit, while also laughing about the fact that she locked up black people for petty marijuana charges, and then fucking when they had done their time, and this is also for more serious crimes too. Once they had completed their sentence, she just left them in jail. Like they should have been out 3 months ago, but they're still sitting there. She laughs about those things. And how she got that power and that ability is because of the bill Joe Biden passed in 1994. So none of these people, whether it's the GOP or the fucking DNC, have any true moral character that's consistent on any actual principles.
The scary thing is the reason why I'm a libertarian, right? You don't give these people power because the power, they can justify anything because they think they're doing the right thing.
Yep. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Absolutely. And I say that all the time. And that drives some people. I got a friend that when I say that, it actually drives them. Well, the road to hell is paved with bad intentions too. So that doesn't mean anything. Well, no, it does mean something. It means we need to be cautious and think about our solutions. And are the solutions worse than the problem?
That used to be a conservative mindset.
Yep.
Well, hold on. Let's think about this for a minute. And now they're the ones doing it. It drives me fucking nuts. And I think most of us feel this way. But then you look at a Joe Jorgensen, and it's like, okay, she might be the ideal libertarian candidate, whereas, certain people like maybe a Gary Johnson wasn't.
Oh yeah, he wasn't. He was far from my ideal libertarian. But at least he definitely seemed like an open-minded person, right?
Right.
And I'm really surprised that they really hung him over the whole, Aleppo thing.
The Aleppo, and then I could debate down Trump like this. It's like, dude, you fucking goofball, because he was a beast. Like his marathon, oh god, he just had a bad campaign manager, really. And I think the whole Libertarian Party does, because Jo Jorgensen. Here's the thing: she might be the ideal libertarian candidate, but the Libertarian Party needs to, in my opinion, get off of the anarchy train, because she wants no public schools, no publicly funded healthcare, none of this other shit. And as much as I understand the government never does anything right, the reason I'm still for public schools, though, is because you have a right to a bare minimum education, because society is better when everyone can read and write and do basic math. We know that. If you provide somebody a minimum basic education, even as bad as the American education system is, they will have a better ability to contribute to society. We know that because we've seen our own country not have a country full of people who could read and write, and it was tough. And only the true fucking...
Well, as it is, though, I mean, we got to look at metrics, right? As it is, though, what are we qualifying as contributing to society?
Just the ability to have most basic skills so you can hold down or contribute in a basic form, whether it's literally working a cash register and handing out the correct change, holding down a job so you can pay a little bit of taxes so you can have spending power economically. It's a snowball effect, right? If you can't do math because you never fucking went to school because you live in rural Minnesota and the schools are too far away, then you can't even do that little part. So you're not doing anything, and you're forced into a survival mode. Like, you have to hunt and fish, and maybe that's not what maybe that person could have been the next huge musician, but they never got introduced to an instrument because they never ended up in a public school and they never learned any of the... You see what I'm saying? You're just limiting people's potential, and we already know that that's not the best way for our society to thrive.
I don't know. I don't necessarily see things that way. I'm not here to let's make this person have the most possible potential that they could possibly... to me, staying out of their business is what I'm about, right? And so to me, I think that comes down, again, road to hell is paved with good intentions. Because these schools can also be used for bad stuff too, indoctrinating your kids into believing certain things and then voting against your rights when they grow up, right? So, I mean, it's I don't know, it's scary. And I think that parents should still have a role in the education of their children, their families, their communities. All that stuff can still happen. I think people can still do jobs. I'm not saying get rid of public schools. I'm not saying that,
But she is, and that's all I was getting
right.
at is but most of us don't identify with Biden or Trump. I've said this. I think you've heard me say this. I think you're one of the few people who actually get what the fuck I'm talking about when I get at this. About a third of our country, a little over a third of our country, actually votes for the president. Of that approximate third, it's split in almost equal halves. About 60 to 70 million vote blue and about 60 to 70 million vote red. That's only about 120 to 140 million Americans. That leaves literally up to and even a little over 210 million Americans who did not vote for either president. That to me is a staggering statistic. And where I started this idea was like, we need a legitimate third party that represents enough of us. The Libertarian Party, as much as I agree with a lot of their base philosophies, the fiscally conservative, socially liberal thing, which to me, that's all being liberal. You know what I mean? Like,
I honestly think most people are libertarian, except for they get hijacked into thinking and following the official narratives that they're always hearing. I think generally people naturally have libertarian ideas. You leave me alone, I leave you alone, blah, blah, blah. But then they're talked into, well, if we let this guy do what he was going to do, he's going to do something that's going to hurt you or someone else. And that's how you end up getting into these.
My specific problem is listening to what she is saying, campaigning for president. She, if she had it her way, and I still might vote for her, I'm probably going to vote for her, because my attitude is like, let's just say she does win. She ain't getting shit done. Which in this situation, I think that's the best thing for our government, would be to get a stalemate president, like a stopgap. Just stop doing stuff, like that. If the government didn't do anything, didn't get anything passed, and just everyone went, because she'd also let everybody go back to work, right? And let us fucking take 8 years to just fix our own fucking problems. We'd probably be better off, because we have enough regulations, too much regulations as it is. I just don't want any more in any direction. I don't want more government, or I don't want any more corporate fucking philandering. I don't want any more fucking regulation or input. It's just too difficult on every platform right now. But she isn't going to get enough of the vote, most likely not because she's a third party, because I think people, if there was like a legitimate candidate that didn't get deemed as like an eccentric, a third party, fucking rogue like a Bernie Sanders really was, which is why the DNC fucked him twice.
But see,
like
my thing
Gary
with Bernie,
Johnson and Joe Jorgensen.
My thing with Bernie is that he still at the end bent the knee, and he can have whatever reasons for doing that. He still bent the knee, and that's where.
Not only did he bend the knee, but he was also his ideas were just wholly communistic.
Right.
I mean, they really were, because he was anti-gun control, and I always said that. I was like, look, shit's so bad right now with the fucking way it is. I would vote for Bernie if he would just get off the gun thing. Like, just let me keep my guns, and just let me make sure I don't have that fear, and I can legislate everything else and make sure you don't fucking turn us into a goddamn communist party. You know what I mean? Like, that's what was my logic, is we can stop you doing what you want to do with the pen as long as you don't go for the guns. Because once they take the guns, they don't even need the pen. They can do whatever the fuck they want.
That should make people suspicious. Why do you want to take my guns? Right. I just don't think that the government is good at protecting. Right? I'm sure they have saved and stopped acts of terrorism. They have done all kinds of things, but who's to say that those acts of terrorism wouldn't have happened if it wouldn't be for some of our foreign policy to begin with?
Well, right? and the government didn't do any of those things. The government didn't stop acts of terrorism. The government didn't win any of the wars. People won those wars. Those are human beings within the government working together that stopped those acts of terrorism and won those wars. You know what I mean? It was Ford fucking rolling out tanks and bombers off of his assembly line. It was those factory workers. It was the people driving those things. It was the generals making brilliant game plans. It was guys risking their lives to break code and fucking spy. That's not the government. Those are all people who worked for our country, which is the government. But the government doesn't do anything. The government doesn't make money. The government doesn't spend money. We spend money. We make money. And we need to stop looking at the government like it's some entity that, like, the fucking... Do you watch Westworld?
I watched the first season.
Okay, I don't want to spoil anything for you. It's great. I'll think of a different analogy, like The Matrix, right, where the guy was in control of everything at the end, you know, and he's sitting there and he's like, "You have a choice. You could go through this door or you could go through that door." That's not how the government works. Like, they don't have any solutions. All they do is spend our money trying to do shit, and the whole entity is still made up of different people with different agendas. And I think I've said this before on the podcast, the biggest thing that disgusts me from both parties in the entire 2020 fucking shit show that we're in is everyone is using this and weaponizing it for their own opportunities and their own fucking gains. I have not seen any major swing of like, we need to come together and fight this and deal with this together as a country, like after 9/11 or after a lot of tragedies. This shit split people into so many little pockets, dude.
And I'm convinced they like it. Like, the people like to be in these little camps where they don't have to think.
Right. Yeah,
right. And they could just be
chambers.
like, yeah, like I'm constantly pointing out this cognitive dissonance that these people have, and they will still continue that same argument. It's like, I mean, you saw that George Floyd's memorial was defaced. Somebody spray painted on it, right?
No, I didn't. That's
so
fucked up.
That was in the news. Somebody got busted for it, and
oh yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
And somebody and people were super, super upset about that, and rightfully so. Like, I don't think you should be defacing.
Dude said, "Motherfucker took off like Carl Lewis." I did read that article. It said had me cracking up. Motherfucker defaced that shit and fucking took off like Carl fucking Lewis, bro.
I just think, let's be consistent here. Let's not deface people's property. Let's not be vandals. Let's not, But everybody wants to, tear down statues and deface graves and tombstones and murals and everything else, right?
Yep.
Because of their social justice. But yet, you can't do that with this guy,
right?
And he was not I'm not a George Floyd hater, but he was not a good guy either.
I mean, He definitely had a past, but I was just talking about this with somebody today, because I don't think you're gonna say what I'm about to say. But there are people out there that are trying to discredit him and his death and what the police did because he had a past.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no. None of those things matter. Here's the deal. It doesn't matter what your past is. None of those are reasons for him to have his constitutional rights violated.
100% correct. Yeah. I definitely don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. Right. I don't think the cops should be killing you.
Right.
Even if you resist, I don't think the cops should,
Right. 100%. You have the right, a constitutionally protected right. And this is the thing I respect about libertarians the most. And I have very little respect for either Republicans or Democrats. I'm not saying conservative and liberal. I'm saying the parties, where I do have a lot of respect for libertarians, because y'all live by the Constitution like it's the fucking Bible, which is the only thing the country should be living to as if it's the Bible.
To a certain degree, right? They're still rooted in basic morality, for instance. Because let's say you brought back slavery and put it in the Constitution. We're not going to be all about that Constitution, right?
Fair.
So it's just the
but you
the
would also
morality
but you guys would also be making the argument that the Constitution, whether it's an amendment added later or the original 13,
the Bill of Rights
already protects against slavery, and all we did was cleaned up that loophole.
Correct.
And that's what the amendments really do. Like, a lot of people don't understand that. And tell me what you think about this. I've always maintained, the way I was taught, the Constitution can be added to but never taken from. Meaning, when we add an amendment, it's not taking away rights, unless it's taking away rights from the government. It's giving rights that were supposed to be included to a new group of people in the original 13, but somehow they found a loophole. Like, for example, slavery. It's like, technically, if you read the first life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right there, the first 3 words, pursuit of happiness, kind of hard to do when you're a fucking slave, right?
Right.
Boom. So they had to pass another amendment to clarify that. That's the only reason they added it. You see what I'm saying? So libertarians would smartly argue from the beginning that ignore the slavery amendment. We don't even need to argue that. It's right there in the first 3 words, so we're not bringing slavery back.
Well,
but
right.
the GOP would fucking argue one reason why we should, and the fucking DNC would argue a different reason why we should.
The reason,
and it wouldn't be based on the Constitution.
The reason why I clarified, the Constitution and it being like the Bible is because I've literally had people in arguments saying, "Well, we'll just change the Constitution, and you have to abide by the Constitution." Because my argument isn't the Constitution; it's about morality and using force and oppression against other people, regardless of what you do for them in return, right?
Sure. Okay.
And so I personally,
so you're not personally held to the Constitution per se.
No.
But I do think that the libertarians definitely respect the Constitution the most out of the 3 parties.
Yeah, we understand the Bill of Rights because that's the whole point of that. It's supposed to keep government from oppressing people.
Right. So
if we stick to that, then we should be fine.
My favorite one, pointing out like the Democratic hypocrisy on gun rights. They're like, well, they didn't like see automatic weapons and shit like that in the future. And this is what I always ask them. I'm like, okay, so let's take right to privacy, right? Does that, back then they were talking about like literally standing outside your door, and they were talking about reading your mail, right? Now we've translated that into like your email, your phone calls.
Yeah.
So that constitutional right evolves with as technology has come through. Yep. But guns don't. Like, how do we track that logic, bud? And they're like, well, they never have a real. Basically, the whole gun thing comes down to one argument that can't be argued with, because it's a fact. Guns are made for one purpose, and that's to kill. However, that's exactly the fucking point.
Right.
Like, they're tools made to kill. Just like knives and bows and arrows. Like the bow and arrow was originally invented to hunt. That's what they'll say. And it's like, yeah, but it was also the number one. They were used on each other too. Right. Like the number one thing. And I don't think it was originally invented to hunt. That actually doesn't make any sense. Like,
I don't know what the numbers are, but the bow and arrow probably still killed more people than guns over the course of history.
I'm just saying, like, if you really sit down and think about it, it would make much more sense that you would invent the bow and arrow for defense from long distances, trying to pick off somebody before they can get to your camp, versus thinking of this wild contraption to take into the woods and try to hunt prey. Like, it just that I understand that's conventional logic, is the bow was invented for hunting, not killing. I would argue that common sense would tell you the exact opposite of that anyways. But the point is they're exactly for that, is to kill, because I don't give a fuck what anybody says. I have the right to defend myself with equal force. And people laugh and they go, dude, if you think the government or a group of fucking zombies or whoever you're going to be able to defend yourself with a single AR-15 and a handgun and a shotgun, you're fucking hilarious. The government will roll on you. And it's like, dude, again, that's not the point. The point isn't for me to win a single one-man war against the government. Especially being married, here's what my goal is. If the fucking cops try to come in my front door and I have reasonable suspicion they're going to murder me or my dog or any of that other shit, my goal is to hold them off long enough to buy my wife time or my kids time to get out safely. In a war, if the boogaloo starts and a bunch of fucking dudes roll through in a giant mob and start pillaging house to house, again, I'm opening fire not because I think I'm going to fucking actually kill 30 people and be the hero of the neighborhood. That's a pipe dream. The reality is, no, I want to be able to go down fighting and protect the people I love. And the only way that's going to happen is if I'm willing to sacrifice my life and able to buy ample time. That's why I need a fucking weapon. That's why I deserve 30 rounds in my fucking AR-15.
And the argument that because you can't win a battle against government has to be one of the most uneducated arguments you could ever have.
I mean, single-handedly, yes, it's true, but I think I know where you're going with this, like the Vietnam thing and shit.
Not even just that. I mean, it's defeatist, first of all, right? To say, well, you might as well just give them all your rights then. I mean, do we use that logic? Do we just say, since there's no way that you can defend yourself against government, if government really wanted to kill you, then you should give up that right? then why not give up every right?
Right.
Because there's no way you're going to win anyway.
That's a good point.
So why stand up? I mean, it's one of the most uneducated arguments somebody can make, because there's no way it holds up in any form or fashion. And especially when you talk about, let's say a revolution, a war against the government or whatever, right? Civil unrest. Something happens with the economy collapses, whatever. You're fighting the government. That war is not going to be won because of a gun per se anyway. It's going to be won because of every other thing that goes on in a war.
Right.
The supply chain, the key infrastructure, the intelligence, all that stuff plays a part in a war.
Yep.
It's not the single man with a gun.
Right. And the other thing is like, because people go, basically the rationale for having these guns, there's multiple reasons. Number one, it's not just to fight an oppressive government.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's also in case one of my neighbors decides to fucking break in my goddamn house and he's on meth. Okay. Which none of my neighbors are on meth, but it's a great example because it is a reality in Minneapolis. Right. And the cops here, the response time is like 30 minutes unless shots have already been fired, and then they show up within 30 seconds. It's amazing. It's magic. It's literal magic. I do not give the government the right to take away my right to defend my home and my family with lethal force. I should not be put in a position where I have to fight a meth addict fisticuffs in my living room.
Yeah,
like, no, I need to be able to make the decision to shoot that man.
And why not have the best possible tool
right
at your disposal?
Right. Exactly.
I mean,
and the whole point of the gun is they're like, well, you could have a knife, you could have a baseball bat. Okay, melee weapons that can be easily taken from you and used against you. A gun, I can hit you from 30 yards. Handgun, 30 yards.
You take
center mass.
You take any of those people and you put them in that situation where they're defending their wife and daughters from somebody.
They're going to wish they had a gun.
They're going to want the best possible weapon.
Yep.
If they had a choice because the weapons were on the table right then and there, what they were going to use to defend themselves, and they picked up a knife.
Yep.
Wow. I would really worry about, them and their survivability instincts.
Yeah.
Because honestly, if your family means that much to you, you use the best possible tool.
And here's the other thing. It's also to defend against foreign governments. Like, people go, oh, that's what the military's for. Well, what if they fucking lose? What if they fail? Like, we have as many guns in this country.
If that was what the military is for, why do we have a draft?
Right. Right. And again, we're in an economic collapse right now. How does the government pay for all these weapons? Tax dollars. What do they do when no one has jobs because fucking the economy shut down? They don't have any more money to take because nobody has jobs for them to take money from. Therefore, they can't buy new tanks. They can't do all that shit. And it still takes men to operate those things, right? If you can't pay your soldiers, doesn't matter how many fucking tanks you have. And America is notorious for having one of the smallest militaries as far as people in it. But we have such high tech that one guy in a jet can take out unestimated numbers.
Oh yeah, we spend gobs of
between
money,
bombs and machine guns and all this other shit. We don't need a lot of people, but we're also spread out across the globe, and we're making a lot of fucking enemies. So again, if I'd have told you a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago what was going to happen in 2020, you'd have laughed at me, told me it was insane. 20 years ago, when Patriot Act got pressed and we said, here's the thing, this is what could happen, people laughed at us. Well, again, this is what we're saying now. This sounds preposterous until it's not.
And
we could absolutely be invaded. We could absolutely have a foreign fucking government. And honestly, the only thing that truly guarantees they don't win is us. Because they don't know North Side like I do, right? They don't know who does and does not have what weapons like I do. They don't know that we're a tight community. And you come on the block like fucking Red Dawn style, the Russians or the fucking Chinese.
Cubans,
like, run up, get done up, baby. Like, here's the thing. We can't do that if we don't have guns. If you roll up with a tank, same thing. Yeah, you're right. Without guns, I can't win against the government. And I may not beat the Chinese government on my own, but the whole of Minnesota, nobody's invading Minnesota. It's not happening. First of all, strategically, we're too far in, but pretend you're on the West Coast. Oregon, Seattle, California, they're all fucked because nobody can have fucking real guns. Nobody can have
No,
real guns.
the threat to
If China decided to invade the West Coast, they'd take the whole thing all the way to the Rocky Mountains like that.
the threat to our country from outside sources are not from an invasion. That would be, I would say, more economic or cyber, right?
Well, it'll start as an infighting. So this is what I've been predicting for years. Is here's what I would do if I were foreign governments: is you destabilize America first by getting us to cascade ourselves back into a second civil war, and then while we weaken ourselves during that, you and I literally said, like, you're going to need some sort of biological warfare. You're going to need some sort of disease so people can't fucking unify properly, because it'll just weaken everybody physically and mentally and financially as well. And then you invade. And you wait until another big excursion has popped up on the other side of the globe where America puts their focus there. Because the only thing that makes America a superpower is being able to fight two theaters of war on two different battlefronts simultaneously. That's the definition of a superpower. 2. Not necessarily 3, 4, or 5, or 6 when your own country is in the middle of an actual civil war. And I've been saying that shit for a while too. Like, we were in a cold civil war for the last 2 years. That shit is heating up. We are in a warm civil war right now. And going back to the prediction thing, it doesn't matter who wins in November. Shit is going to hit the fucking fan. If Biden wins, I do not think Trump is joking when he says he's going to challenge the election. That's not good for the stability. Well,
that's what I'm... They're setting the stage now with voting with through the mail and all that stuff. I have no problem with any of that stuff, but I know where this is going because no matter who wins, that can be the contesting point.
Yep.
Oh, the mail. It's because of the mail. It's because there's fraud here. Either side can pull that.
Yep.
And so
and they will.
And they will. So you're going to have I think you'll have a contested election regardless of who wins.
What's going to be hilarious is people are going to mock the Democratic Party when they're the ones that challenge it. If Trump wins and the Democratic Party challenges it and says there was voter mail-in fraud by the GOP, people are going to mock and ridicule the Democrats because they're the ones pushing for it so hard. And it's not that no one, I don't know anyone who is against mail-in voting. However, everyone I know that is opposing the Democrats on this, whether this is true or not, I also perceive this as they don't just want mail-in voting. They want to eliminate booth voting. That's what I don't trust. I don't trust, and I would never, if you want to vote by mail, maybe you got a physical handicap, maybe you're not in the country right now, cool. I respect that, allow you to do that. The reason I don't want it to become the standard is, number one, too much shit already goes lost in the mail, regardless. Number 2, I lose my potential for anonymity in my vote. Like, I can't vote anonymously and prevent voter fraud at the same time. So
your vote is going out into the ethers everywhere. It's going through the mail. It's going through this particular hub. It's going to this particular hub. It's at just one place.
And they go, well, how about voting by email? Well, first of all, that's a terrible idea because everything gets hacked on a regular basis. People are like, well, how come then? Why can you pay your taxes and you can do this and you can do that? Those things get hacked too much. The election's too important. Number 2, no matter what we do with technology, every single time they do the study, we continuously come back to this fact. The most accurate way to count votes is paper fucking ballots, specifically in person. And if you let Trump win in November as the DNC, because you fucked up and you're fucking up and you're going to let him win, the left is going to lose their fucking mind. You think they rioted over George Floyd? They're going to lose their fucking mind if Trump wins. If Biden wins and Trump challenges the fucking election, the left is still going to lose their fucking mind, and so will I. Because it's like, no, dude, you lost. Get out, and then we'll sort it out. Like, that's not how American democracy works. You don't challenge the election and hold on to your fucking office like Hitler did. You don't do that, or Mussolini, or any other person that literally became a dictator. Because this is the other thing, man, is people don't realize this. They want to give the government all these powers. They want to invite a guy like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in that office. And here's the thing is, like, tyranny, tyrants, fascism, none of those were ever taken, right? Communism always had a violent revolution, but fascist dictators were always elected and then consolidated power and refused to leave.
And and key fascists. Most people don't understand this, but key fascist regimes had socialist roots. Even
Correct.
Mussolini, who was a fascist, we know he's a fascist.
Yep.
Started his life at doing a socialist magazine.
Correct.
You
Yep.
know, so
And that's the thing. Socialism turns into either communism or fascism.
correct. I think it can go. I think it can go either way. And then
Sure,
people
I guess
like to
I
say
understand Sweden right now is very democratically socialist for now. But Sweden and Norway and certain other, they've always been at peace as soon as they realized they were no longer barbarians and savages. Like, so that's not exact. And they're small countries, very indigenous, very like monoculture, not a lot of diversity. Like,
on some of the the Nordic,
very also spread out.
well, and for what, like some of the Nordic regions, right? They were known for being very violent at the time, but they're also some of the first people that ended slavery,
Right.
which is weird, right?
Yep.
So that said, though,
But it's not the best. My only point was it's not the best example to use for like
right.
a healthy version of democratic socialism. It's like a super small fucking country. Everyone looks and talks and thinks the same. Like,
And
it works there because it works there.
But
that doesn't mean it works
wait
here.
until most of the people in Sweden are not from Sweden.
Right.
This is where you change the dynamic of a culture or society, and by no means am I anti-immigrant or any of that stuff. So people
But you're
like
right,
to
though.
automatically paint that
No,
picture.
but you're right though, because most of us aren't from here.
Right.
Bottom line, our entire country is built on immigrants. So you're not making an anti-immigration argument. You're saying the analogy is Sweden. They've always been from Sweden. They're always going to be from Sweden,
It's
and the
easy.
majority of the population is from Sweden. Here,
Yeah.
it started the opposite. Most people here aren't indigenous Native Americans. Like, we slaughtered those people. There's like 0.5% of them left or some shit like that. It's fucking horrible. The point you're making is that we're all not from here.
Right.
And socialism doesn't flirt with that well. It doesn't bring multicultures together.
It's just common sense. One
I'm
family.
going to grab a do. You want one?
Sure. One family in a household can get along. Put 5 families in a household. And it's just the more complicated it gets, the more families you add to this picture. Now, if you picture a country as a household,
if people are confused by that analogy, I got a very specific version of it. You get along with your wife and your family. You barely get along with your in-laws, which are her parents.
Mm-hmm.
Then you bring in your parents. She barely gets along with your parents, and your parents don't get along with each other at all. The more diversity you add to that, now, here's the irony. When it comes to art, innovation on engineering and scientific and philosophy, the exact opposite is true for what we're saying. Like, bringing those different cultures together, like for example, terrible example, but it fits, public school, right? University, where you bring multitudes of different people together and exchange new ideas in a close environment. That's why you always seen most of the innovations come from cities. You didn't see a lot of innovation come from some random fucking farmer in the middle of nowhere because he had no one to bounce ideas off of. You know what I mean? So it's like,
or if he may have invented something, he or she might have invented something, but it never got out to the world.
yeah, exactly. Maybe they did exactly, but
Yeah.
they didn't have an avenue because they didn't talk to anybody. And that's actually another, not to double back on our conversation, but that's another example for like why I'm still always going to be pro public school, is because again, at a minimum, you're giving these people a bare threshold of resources to where they can better themselves. Because by bettering and this is a very libertarian philosophy, is the good of the individual is what is good for the society as a whole. When you allow the individual to better themselves as they see fit, it's better for society. And that goes back to what we were saying earlier. This is one thing I did want to actually hammer on with you. Why socialism and communism sounds like a great idea, but is actually terrible, because it gets into wants versus needs, right? So we start talking about this idea of like, during the shutdown, I've heard people like, why, man, I can't believe there's fucking food lines. Like, why doesn't the government just like provide everyone what they need until we can reopen the economy? Like, just give everybody food and fucking let them not have to pay for water and all that. And that sounds like a beautiful idea until you start getting into the idea of abstract needs versus wants. So it's like, well, I need a guitar. because that's how I maintain my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But my boy Anwar needs fucking to go to a gym and lift weights. You need to go do X, Y, and Z, whether it was raising chickens or fucking, and you need a certain amount of funds to dictate that. Because who is the government going to decide what a good guitar is, right? Are they going to give me an Epiphone, right? Or do I deserve a Gibson? This is where we get back into the idea of free choice and the free market, and where socialism doesn't work in any of these large situations, because again, the needs and the wants of the individual, and giving that individual the freedom to choose for themselves how they're going to better themselves and how they're going to contribute to society, is how America leads the world in pop culture, as far as TVs,
Correct.
movie
Yep.
shows, art, fucking really even science innovation. I mean, yeah, India and Germany, they've fucking done some amazing shit, but we still are the heart of that. Comedy, you know, we invented stand-up comedy. You know what I mean? Like, that wasn't the thing. There was court jesters and shit, but I mean, like, comedy. That's us. That only happened because we had the freedom to decide that was something that somebody wanted to do, and then they built an entire economic market around that. When you're having the government provide your needs, all of those things fall by the wayside. That's why there was never stand-up comedy in communist Russia or fascist Italy or fucking Nazi Germany. And
Well, in some countries, you're still not allowed to joke about some things,
right,
right?
because they don't have free speech. And
Yeah.
if you don't have free speech, then you don't have the ability to freely communicate thought without fear. And that's you know, I've been trying to explain this to somebody else, like, liberty is freedom minus fear. And that's where that idea comes from. Like, give me liberty or give me death. Because when you tell me I'm free, but I'm constantly living in fear, I don't have liberty now. And
Well,
that's not a better way to live.
I don't know. To me, it's like, okay, there's no world void of danger and threat, right?
What do you
So
mean?
even if libertarians got what they wanted and had as much possible liberty and freedom that they would have, you still have dangerous people out there that could cause problems for you. Right? You still have to worry about going in a dark alley at night or whatever. You still have to worry about being robbed and whatever, right? So to me, there's no solution for all of that except for you deal with life, right? You deal with it.
Right.
You have personal responsibility and you prepare for those bad things.
Mm-hmm.
But to disarm me so then I have to decide where I can go and can't go at night.
Right.
You know, that's when it's no longer liberty.
Right.
You still have fear. No matter how safe you are by government, you will always have fear.
Right.
And matter of fact, we have the biggest government of all time ever.
Right.
Right? The biggest military, the biggest everything, the biggest government spying on citizens.
Yep.
Not keeping anybody safe.
Right.
You would think that they'd be able to stop all this shit with all the money, at least at the rate that they spend it. They should be able to come up with all these things. We have, computers in Utah. This computer base in Utah that collects all of our data. You've seen those, right? I mean, the shit. We should be safer and safer and safer and safer and safer. But yet, what do politicians vote or get votes on? Fear.
Yep.
And promises.
Mm-hmm.
You know, somebody's going to take this from you. I will protect that.
Yep.
Right? Or I will provide this for you for free. Right? So now we've gotten to this point where, you know, socialism, politicians have learned by promising free shit that they can get elected. And so it never ends. And in order to get shit, you have to take it from somewhere else.
Yep.
So you have all this redistribution.
Yep.
And so they have to paint the narrative that all these people over here, they're keeping from you.
Yep.
And that's the reason why you're miserable right now. Because they're keeping from you right now.
Yep.
To me, it's like,
I would say the reason
end?
you're miserable is because the government won't get out of your way and allow you to fucking start your own business. It's too hard to start a small business. There's too many small things that are in your way. And the one thing the government does do right is fucking allow you to, if you do it properly, if you build your company and reinvest in your own company, you don't have to pay fucking corporate tax. People give Bezos and Amazon shit for that. And it's like, you guys don't understand what you're talking about. He still pays personal income tax on his billions of dollars of income. Amazon doesn't have to pay tax because the $100 million they made, or the $2 billion they made, they reinvested that in their own company. They opened up a new facility. They fucking bought new robots.
Not
they
only
did
that,
all those things, and they're providing more jobs.
Right. Not only that, their existence is creating more taxes collected in that state.
Correct.
And that's why they get these agreements.
And the reason
like,
I bring...
hey, move your headquarters to Minnesota. I mean, Minnesota used to have almost all the major headquarters of big corporations.
Yep.
And now, like, you know, Texas may stole Apple or whatever, right?
Right, yep.
But they do it with saying, hey, you don't have to pay taxes if you come here.
Yep. And the reason I bring up Amazon in context to starting a small business is because if you do it the right way, you can grow your business exponentially fast, which is amazing. You can become a $1 million hitter. Look at how fast Netflix grew. And they crippled an entire industry. Nobody's complaining about that. You know what I mean? Everyone who's complaining about Jeff Bezos, I bet you their asses have Amazon Prime and they enjoy their 2-day shipping.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, there's some hypocrisy there too, but to start a small business and just like make your way as a carpenter or an electrician or a handyman or a landscaping company. Maybe you don't have these big visions of taking over the world like an Amazon or an Apple or any of these other major corporations. That's what I'm referring to when I say it's too fucking hard. It's too easy for giant corporations to dominate every industry and literally cost their competition out of the market. And it's fucked, but that's done because there's so much government regulation on small businesses, local municipalities, things like that, that it makes it really fucking difficult for you to just make your own way. And it's easier to just go work for Amazon at $15 an hour, which you're never going to go anywhere in life doing that. Like, everybody knows if you want to make it in this world, you've got to kick a lot of ass doing something. Like, you have to work your way to the top of Amazon or Target or Best Buy or Walmart, or you have to start your own deal. And that's still always the best way, is figure out your own deal. And it used to be really fucking easy. I had Jen Dean on last night.
But
you used to be able to be a gigging musician and easily raise a family. Easy. Now you're a gigging musician. You know how fucking hard it is to make music or make money? You know. I mean, fuck, dude. It's unreasonable. Nobody's able to fully dedicate themselves to doing that because there's so many fucking bullshit legal rules and loopholes that the only people who can successfully navigate that are the fucking record labels. Like, you have to be insanely lucky.
It's done that way on purpose, though.
Right.
So when people say we need regulations, people need to understand that not all regulations are what people think they are.
The DNR ones seem to work here. Everything else seems to fail miserably.
But regulations also stifle, or are actually written by the very people they're supposed to control, so they can control their competition.
Let me ask you: do you support the Minnesota DNR? Because I'm not trying to put you in a box.
I do not know. I'm not a government person, so I'm not going to say yes. I do not know enough about statistics and to say that, hey, what they're doing is a net positive. Right.
Okay.
So I don't.
And I'm not trying to put you in a box.
I can't say.
I
one way or another.
I know that you're against all other form of governments. I never actually clarified that. I brought the example up. You nodded. You seemed like you understood. But
so what people misunderstand is that somehow people think that I think things would be better. Better is subjective, right? I only merely argue against government in the fact that, from a morality standpoint. Meaning using force against peaceful people, right? If we need to do something, you know, okay, does it require force against peaceful people?
Sure.
Yes. Then I don't want it.
Right.
You know, and then that's how I look at it. Because right or wrong, I'm not the one that's, you know, advocating for force against peaceful people.
Sure.
So I mean, and I know it breaks it down. It's not, and people try to put that into some kind of utopia idea or utopian vision. It's not utopian. I am by no means saying life would be better or easier for people.
So you don't have a problem with like going after criminals and like fighting actual wars. You just have and how you distill each issue is, does this new idea require us using force on peaceful people.
Correct.
If the answer is yes, you're not for it.
Right. And a lot of people have, I'm going to, you break a few eggs to make an omelet. A lot of people have that idea in almost everything in life, including how government works, right? To me, breaking eggs is only good for making omelets.
Right.
I don't like to use that idea like, oh, we're gonna ruin this particular group of people to help this group of people, right? Which is what government does. Government picks winners and losers.
That is true.
So it has to take from somewhere else in order to give to something else, right? Give someone else, right? So to me, it's like, what basis am I making this decision on? What grounds is this? Do I morally have the right to take from what this person earned and give it to someone else? When that can be done voluntarily, in some other fashion or form, in some other means that we'll use, like with the non-aggression principle, the least amount of force to get something done, right? And now, especially in today's society, when we got GoFundMes and all kinds of ways to raise money, I mean, we could solve a lot of problems without using force against people involuntarily.
Right.
And the people would actually speak, because if the people really want it, it'll get done. Not 10% of the population wants this, but they just happen to be the most vocal 10%.
This would have been almost impossible to do pre-internet, but now we have this infrastructure in place where we see examples like GoFundMe's, the whole crowdfunding idea, where we do see it work, and you could easily fund most things other than probably like the military and military research and shit like that. Like that's a tough one. You know what I mean? Like that's just a really tough one to suss out, but I don't know. It's tough because really leaving everything up to the private market isn't always better either. You know, when you allow that kind of shit, because sometimes the private market, like, let's look at the healthcare industry. Like, the cost of healthcare has gone up extraordinarily.
And why is that?
Well, because there's zero regulation on it. They can charge as much as they want.
No, there's plenty of regulation on it.
I'm talking about on the prices of healthcare. There's zero regulation on the prices of anything.
But see, okay, so now I used to work in the healthcare business, and I still do, really. But the thing is government helps inflate costs of doing business. Obviously,
I would say private insurance did more.
Okay, so let's look at that, right? So because
insurance is the biggest fucking scam on the planet.
Yes and no. Let's go back to the very beginnings of insurance, right? Let's go back to and see how we got to where we got now. Let's say I'm somebody, I've got $1 million. I've hatched up the scheme where, like, hey man, I can take care of your medical bills, right? And if you just pay me a certain amount per month or whatever, I'll make sure your bills are covered, right? Obviously, I need to make a profit in order to keep that going, right? Because you don't know how much it's going to cost, right? You don't know that, okay, well, I might be void. I might do good this year, but next year I lost, and now my insurance is over.
Basically, right? Insurance seems like a glorified Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme.
Right, but insurance used to be only for catastrophic things back in the day. Like, when it first came out, it didn't pay for everything you went to the doctor for. You got cancer, you got something that racked up a crazy bill, that's what it covered. But the consumer, wanting more and more and more, right, wants now preventative. They want everything, right? And they want it still to stay cheap, right? It doesn't. But then look at healthcare comes, like, now it's managed through your work, it's managed through government, it's managed through this. Now there's no pricing. Pricing isn't even an issue anymore because it's going to get covered.
Well, that's mostly because the insurance companies moved to an aggregate. So it made more sense for them to try to sign large amounts of people up at a time instead of one at a time.
Right, because it doesn't work that other way. I mean, it absorbed from a completely voluntary society. It doesn't work that other way.
Right, because, I mean, you're only collecting X amount of dollars from X amount of people per month. One person gets a catastrophic injury.
Right, and you bankrupt the whole thing.
But that's because of the way healthcare was 100% privatized. Like, hospitals try to turn a profit. Like, that's what I'm getting at. Like, way back in the day, the news was subsidized by the government because the thought and theory was, you're providing news. You shouldn't need to turn a profit. The news always lost money because it's not supposed to be for profit. When did healthcare become like, for example, public school? Now there's plenty of flaws with public school. The funding's there. Most of it just doesn't get to the classroom, but it's not for profit. So the cost of schooling and education hasn't skyrocketed. Is what's fucking skyrocketed is the admins taking a bigger cut as their funding goes up, as our population goes up. That just simply makes sense.
And the need for more and more administration.
Which is arbitrary, but there is no need for more administration. They're just doing that, adding more positions. It's supposed to be you're getting more funding because you have more people and you have more students. So you need a bigger school. You need more teachers. You need more this. But the money doesn't get down there. It doesn't make it to the school. That's a whole different issue. My point is like the cost of education on a primary level, so elementary, middle, and high school, hasn't skyrocketed because it was never fully privatized. As soon as fucking private education, like as far as student loans started coming out, like we're seeing the exploitation on the private side as well. Like a lack of the right type of government intervention, because we've seen they fucking completely overcorrected when they made all student loans federal. That's an overcorrection the other way, because now it's fucking, then they tied that shit. Trump passed that fucking bill. I don't know if you know about this. Here's how they get you. This is how the government gets you, by coming in to save everyone's asses. If you didn't declare eligibility for the draft, you are not eligible for any federal student loans now. The way healthcare or education costs at the college level, that means poor people who didn't lick the boot and volunteer for the war don't get to go to school. That's what that basically means. It's classism. You see what I'm getting at here? So they used funding to deny you certain rights that you should be able to get to, but no one can afford to go to school without getting now a federal student loan. And by doing that,
right, but easy access to money, like credit cards.
And then you can't declare fucking bankruptcy from student loans. Now the government literally owns you.
Yeah, easy access to funds also helps create market prices, right? That's the problem. If people could, if let's say, for some reason people couldn't pay that money anymore, colleges would have to offer cheaper prices in order to stay in business.
Well, colleges started making money, though. And that's what I want to know is, where does that money go? Like, all this money they make off the NCAA, that should fucking single-handedly pay for everybody to go to college, but you still have to pay to go to college. They say they give out a few free scholarships, but everyone else, I mean, you gave me a free scholarship to go play football. Let's say that's equal to $40,000 a year in school tuition. We have, I think it's 73 kids on a college football team. So 40,000 times 73, that's like fucking $310,000 a year. Trust me, they make a lot more than 310 grand off the fucking football team.
Yeah.
So why is that an issue? Why is that even a thing? Right? To me, that's a dead wash. Plus, you have boosters and alumni donating money. A lot of these colleges accept state and federal funds, and then they still charge all the other students. And I get it. They got infrastructure. They got salaries. But the funding is more than the expenses.
Science is researched in schools. And
I get it. But they're definitely making more money than they're spending. Where is that money going? Why has suddenly in the last 30, 40 years, right, the cost of those schools skyrocketed? It's because they started turning a profit. And there's certain entities in our country that never used to be for profit. Doctors and hospitals weren't turning profit, right?
But
schools don't.
But you had to turn a profit, though. To keep a school running, you still had to have profit. So profit itself isn't the bad thing. It's when you start getting into a system that gets government money.
I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. What I'm getting at is they were run like a nonprofit. Right. So yeah, you need to like be above zero.
Right.
But that money goes right back in. It's its own self-feeding organism. Whereas when other people start taking dividends and profits,
right,
like a stockholder almost.
Yep. But you still have to have money for rainy days. You still always have to. So we can't put a cap on how much profit somebody makes or puts away or whatever.
I don't want to put a cap on it, but I'm saying
if it's too expensive for people to go to school, they ain't going to make money.
But
So they have an incentive to
think
keep
about it
people
like this.
going to school.
Private schools definitely make money. They turn a profit, and they have the right to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Public schools are run like a nonprofit. We have that two versions, right? But we don't have the college version of that. We don't have sort of have a healthcare version of that now. And I'm making the argument that I'm not completely against these ideas. I think is what made America great in the first place is the balance of these socialistic ideas without alienating either the private or the democratic version, right? So you've got private security if you're rich enough. You've got a democratically elected sheriff, and you've got a private police force. You've got public schools, social, right? That's a socialistic idea. You got public schools, but then you also have private schools. Mm-hmm. So the balance and the option, again, it's the freedom to have these at your disposal. If you can afford these other things, you have the right to do them. If you can't, you still have a basic education.
Right. Okay. So now
you see what I'm getting at here?
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with. And I used to think like that. I used to be 100% for, because obviously you provide welfare, a safety net, education, crime goes down. Right. There's some things that we can measurably see when you help people out. That crime goes down, things get easier for some people, right? We see that. But my whole thing is, okay, so at what cost? Is this something that's sustainable? Is this something that humans will always will start off small, but it will always ramp up? In 80 years, it'll always be, a tyrant dictatorship. Whatever, you know what I mean? Like, is it worth it to begin with? To me, it's like, okay, where does it go? Can we stop? Do we have this? Like, I'm only gonna do a little bit of drugs because government's kind of like that drugs. You're getting that hit. I'm only gonna do a little bit, right? But then it gets to be more and more and more and more, and then you need more and more and more, and then. Now
that's true for a lot of drugs, but that's not true for like weed,
right?
You know what I mean? Like, so, you don't become a mass consumer of weed, and it doesn't ruin your life, right? So certain things might be okay, but you can't take the idea and apply it to everything. So like, oh, I'm okay smoking weed. Oh yeah, let's try blow. I'll just do a little bit. That drug doesn't work like that. Careful. You can't take the logic because one drug is okay. And I'm trying to stay with the analogy here. So it's like, just because the government worked in one scenario or didn't work doesn't mean it is or isn't going to work in this other area. I think we do that too on both sides. We try to broadly apply the government's effectiveness or lack of effectiveness and act like everything should just be like that.
Right.
Now we're almost getting into like a states' rights issue, right? Because we're kind of funneling through this idea of the government, but the beautiful thing about America is we have different levels of that. And is what I have noticed is that the majority of problems, when dealt with at the localest of possible levels, usually ends up with the closest thing to the right solution.
Right, because it's more tailored to the people that need it and see it.
Exactly.
And then there's also an official that I will see your ass at the local grocery store if you pull any shit.
Right, yep.
Right? That's the kind of stuff we need.
Yep.
But everybody else is so far removed. And to me, that's what we should have. We can't have this one-size-fits-all thing for everybody.
Right.
I think that kind of screws people up, and that actually screws up diversity in my opinion as well, right?
Sure.
So to me, like what people are doing in California, they're doing something different than Georgia.
Right.
Fine, that's great.
Yep.
I mean, why do they all got to be the same?
That's the point. That's exactly what made America beautiful, is like it's 50 different countries with different cultures, and like fucking Minnesota for the longest time was like not exclusively but predominantly German. And the reason they picked Germany, or the reason they picked Minnesota, is because where they were from in Germany, when those group of immigrants came over, our landscape reminded them of home. Same thing. You get the fucking Irish people that came in and they ended up in the Appalachian Mountains because it reminded them of the fucking the rolling hills and small mountain range in Ireland. And same thing with Scotland, the rolling hills and the fucking of northern Scotland. And they completely adapted and have their own complete culture in the Appalachian Mountains from all the way up into Virginia, all the way down to the deep south.
Right.
We don't know what's best for them down there because we're not fucking from there.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is I don't want to claim that I know what's best for people. And that seems to be what our current political debates are about, right? It's I want to control you. I want to give you, let's say, healthcare should be run by the government, right? Because that would be better and everybody would have it, blah blah blah, right? So somebody is saying, I know what's best for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that I know what's best for you.
Right.
I'm only speaking from a moral standpoint. I'm not saying that I'm the most moral person. I've done some fucked up shit.
It seems reasonable. You're saying you should decide what's best for you. That seems reasonable. Nobody should have a problem with that. But the perception is from the Libertarian Party is that you don't want anybody to be able to even ask for help almost. Right? And I know this isn't true, but this is the way it's perceived. For example, like a lot of the libertarians, and I know you've shown in multiple examples, you're not this libertarian. So we're not talking about Jamal.
Right.
I'm not trying to put you in a box.
Yep.
I'm just talking about like why people like Joe Jorgensen in that party currently aren't gaining a shit ton of steam, because we already agree most people are probably more libertarian than they're Democrat or Republican.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they just don't know it.
But the fucking party and the way it's perceived, including people like Joe Jorgensen, is they're borderline anarchists because they want to get rid of any government funding towards healthcare. They want to get rid of Social Security. They want to get rid of public school funding. And these things, I understand what you mean about like you give people too much of a social safety net. They don't find the struggle.
Yeah.
I get it, but at the same time, we're also like talking about being, you know, the beacon of humanity, right? Like we're supposed to be better than that. Like the whole point of the country and the whole point of a society, I've heard you give people shit about this, the social contract, right? Like there is no social contract. Is what it really is we all just kind of have this understanding that if we all work together, it's easier for us.
Yep.
Because anybody with a fucking brain, and I got a couple buddies who are like,
I agree. If it's voluntary.
Right, exactly. Until it gets enforced by.
And so, okay, so let me phrase this thing. I mean, I'm probably very misunderstood in
hold
some
on.
of my takes.
Let me finish this thought real quick. That's what I was trying to say. Is the problem with the Joe Jorgensens and that party is they don't seem if you want to get rid of all of those things. Right. And they're also like, yeah, fuck the police, defund the police. We don't want any government, basically. Right. Maybe not Joe Jorgensen literally, but I had to leave a libertarian group because the whole is so fucking extreme that it's insane and it's alienating, because it's like, here's the deal, man. Like we still need some cops like where I'm at in the hood, because yes, I have guns and I want to reserve the right to defend myself, but we also shouldn't be forcing every American citizen to carry a weapon that they're not comfortable with, even if they're trained. If they're a pacifist and they don't want to use a weapon, but they shouldn't have to fucking make that choice between carrying a weapon and defending themselves or completely allowing their daughter to get raped. They should also have the option to call a police officer, somebody, a professional who's there awake, because we could say, we'll leave it up to the community. Here's the thing, man. If you come up banging on my door in the middle of the night because somebody invaded your home, I'm not going to wake up, first of all, unless you're in my fucking house, and then you're probably getting shot. Number two, you're going to scare the fucking shit out of me, right? Not a good idea. And you can't expect to run out and get your community to come help your shit. So you call the fucking cops and they show up because they signed up for it. They're getting paid for it. And they're supposed to serve and protect. That's a reasonable ask.
Okay.
But the libertarians want to get rid of all of that. So it's like, it just seems like they're so willing to leave everyone defenseless and helpless.
Here's my argument. I don't think that,
and I know you're not saying
I don't think that's their intent.
But that's the way they're perceived for sure. And that's my only real point.
I think they're perceived that because we're making, when you say things like you just said, you're taking it from because we are the way we are right now. But all that stuff adjusts when you actually do have to worry about your community, when you do actually have to come to your neighbor's aid, when you do have to do these things, when that becomes the new thing. You're not going to, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to save your neighbor's ass isn't going to be that crazy of an idea, you know what I mean? Because you're going to want that too. So to me, it's like we've gotten so used and accustomed to the way things are now that those ideas seem so foreign and so out there. personally, I don't think that people should be forced to carry guns or forced to have weapons, any of that stuff, because again, that's force. But I do think people should have weapons. They should have some kind of way to protect themselves.
I mean, it's common sense. You should, but right, that's the difference, is giving people, and that's all I'm really talking about, is giving people options. And if the Libertarian Party could like figure out a way to switch up their mantra as a whole, I think they could win this election or the next one or whatever. But they're just a little too. They're widely perceived, including myself. Like, most libertarians are not reasonable like you. Most of them that I meet are fucking borderline anarchists. I had a fucking bunch of them try to argue to me that I don't have the right to my own intellectual property because I can't own music. So you should be able to take my song and go do whatever you fucking want with it and never have to pay me royalties.
This is okay. So let me get into that.
Fuck that. Fuck them. I'll fucking die on this hill. You steal my fucking song.
You can die on this hill. I've honestly been thinking about this a lot lately because they have an argument. Okay, when did intellectual property start?
I don't care.
No, I'm just going to say, when did you have to know these things to understand like what it is, why it exists, and what has happened since, right? So, intellectual property protects certain people, right? So if I create something, it protects me from somebody else from stealing my stuff. If I write a hit song and all of a sudden somebody else gets famous,
or you make an invention,
right? So that sounds great and wonderful, but in the end, those things end up also oppressing people too, right? I can have a patent on something forever and then make sure that no other company can do these patents or whatever.
That's
right?
actually not true. You only get 10 years on those, and that's why you get generics, because you can only have the exclusive right to your patent for 10 years.
Unless you're
that's a copyright. That's
right,
different.
but that's the same thing. It's intellectual property.
It's totally different, but
it's intellectual property, and you own your intellectual property.
Right, but that's why there's a difference between patents and copyright. So, like, when it comes to an invention, it's a patent because you have 10 years on an exclusive right to market and sell that product.
I understand that.
But a copyright, as long as you renew your copyright, you can own it forever, basically. But if you even once fail to renew that copyright on time, it becomes public domain.
Right. But I believe that intellectual property is going to end up being what screws us in the end. And the reason why I say that, and I'm not saying I'm, of course, against it or anything, this is just something I've been digesting. Because if you look at China, they don't give a shit about your intellectual property. Mm-hmm. And what's China doing? Getting bigger and bigger and stealing and stealing and stealing. And so half the world, more than half the world, can take all your shit for free while you're playing by a different set of rules. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but here's the thing. So this is almost like economic Darwinism. Cool. They're temporarily having a boost by stealing intellectual property, but by America's standards, when we protect intellectual property, is what we do is that forces stimulated competition, which breeds innovation. So because you're not allowed to just steal somebody else's shit, you're forced to make a better version of it, which ultimately benefits the consumer and the economy. That's why China is playing with fucking fire, because it's all rigged and it's all based on somebody else's ideas.
But it's still artificial stimulation.
True.
It's not an organic. It's still government interference in a market. So if I invent something and you say, "Shit, dude, that's pretty cool," but I can one up you, but I still need to use your basic ideas. You're stealing my stuff, but you're still making an improvement on the product, and it's getting out.
And there's ways you can legally do that now.
And it's getting into the world, and it's better and better and better. But with laws, I could be like, "No, you built this on my idea. You can't make a better product than me out based off my thing. You have to do it a completely different way." And so I think China is going to one-up us. See, okay, first of all,
then why is what? I mean, see, here's the problem I have with this, because like, it also transcends in like your brand name. Like that's your intellectual property, right? So let's say you start Carlson Motors and you make the most badass fucking motors
and somebody
around.
else comes and says they're Carlson Motors, and
that's where fuck your technology, right?
Yep.
They could back engineer your shit all the time. That's not what people are really into. They know that when they buy something with Carlson Motors name on it, they're getting this motherfucker's engineering, and it's gonna be reliable and it's gonna be X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
So you're really, again, it's not about the government coming in and intervening and blah, 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 blah. It's going, no, this is a way to make sure that we keep fair and honest competition, because again, the cheater, the guy who steals your intellectual property and poses as...
But there's already some laws that say, you know, you can't obviously try to say you can't damage my reputation, right? There's those kind of laws, right? My concern is like, it's easy. How easy is it to get a Gucci bag or get any fake coach thing? You can get them anywhere, right?
But they're not the same. They're not the same quality.
Correct, but that exists, right?
The counterfeit market, the black market, yeah.
But China is like, for instance, if they have
the biggest black market in the world,
right?
By the way.
Are we setting ourselves up? First of all, okay. For instance, like saying, okay, let's put some regulations on us so we can't use coal. Meanwhile, China is like boosting coal, right?
Right.
So we're like, oh, we're gonna restrict ourselves, right? Meanwhile, China, our biggest rival, whatever, right?
Definitely.
They don't get to play. They don't have to play by that same rule, right? They don't also have to play by the human rights rule either. They got every economic advantage at now getting to some point. Right. And then they steal all of our intellectual property. Right. So, I mean, it's like, oh my God. So, okay, where does this go? That's my whole thing.
But
where does this go?
Here's my point is like, to me, that's inconsequential, because it's like this. It's like if you said, Jared, I want to start a podcast. I really like your setup here. I've had this conversation, so I'm using a real world example. If I just came over to your house and built this and set your computer up, technically I just gave you my intellectual property for free, but you don't know how to fucking use any of this. And even if you Googled it, right, you didn't birth an idea, grow it, flesh out all its fucking problems. Like this is why you can't just sign a quarterback in the NFL and throw him on your fucking team. He's got to be part of it from the ground up, so he understands everything about that vehicle that he currently is in. Right, which is that football team, that offense, that system, that scheme, whatever. And then he can start to be successful because he can see all the flaws in the matrix and fix it no matter what, at any angle. The Chinese won't be able to do that, because in order for them to exploit this, like you said, like they don't have the human rights violations.
They're going to own all this.
Well, they're going to temporarily have a stake in everything, but that system is going to collapse. They have no ethical or moral boundaries because they have fucking literal slaves, right? They steal everyone else's, and people will catch on to the game, whether it's other governments or consumers, and it's going to collapse on them, and then they will go into the dark ages. And another government will come in. It'll probably be fucking China or somebody else, and it'll be a whole thing. And we're still going to be standing strong because literally our entire time we've been re-innovating.
So here's my thing. Are we sure? You can say with a definitive fact that this is what's going to happen to China, right? And then what's going to happen to us? To me, I think we handicap ourselves all the time. Like as the United States, and the doubling of our debt and everything that we're doing, a lot, because we can just take one thing like intellectual property, right? It's just one cog of many different things that make America what America is, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how do we know that in 100 years America is even still here? How do we know China is any different in 100 years?
I mean,
right?
I guess we don't.
We don't know any of that
Assuming
stuff.
all things are equal and both countries are still standing. I think the country who relies on itself to be innovative and create and protect intellectual property prospers, and the country that allows you to steal intellectual property because they have no respect for that, they won't be. It's almost like you said, they have a safety net there, so they don't rely on innovation. Right? So they don't build those life skills, metaphorically speaking, to sustain their model.
So let me
It's almost the same logic.
I don't want to make. I'm not trying to be arguing.
You see what I'm saying, though?
Yeah.
No, and we're just exploring an idea here.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to convince you of anything. Like, we're literally just having an open.
And this is like I said, this is.
I'm exploring this idea with you.
This is a new subject that I've been.
Me too.
Internalizing lately, right?
And I get emotional because I am a musician,
yeah,
and I'm like, "Fuck you, it's my song."
And me too.
But I have, yeah.
But I have to. I always try to remove myself from this picture. So let's go back to the beginning. If I'm a farmer, and I have 200 acres to farm, and I invent something, right, and that helps me, take care of my crops, right? That's automatically going to create better economic situation, not just for myself, but the people that I can provide food for, because I can do it cheaply and easier and so forth, and I can cut them better deals and blah, 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 right?
Right.
So then what happens when the neighbor comes and steals my idea?
Well, what kind of idea is it? Is your idea watering your crops?
No, let's say I added something to a tractor or something. I invented a piece of metal I can put on a tractor and it can work better, right? So then they do the same thing. Are they stealing my intellectual property?
Well, here's the thing is,
I'm just trying to break it down to its base roots, because
right. I'm exploring
yeah.
this with you. So here's how I think it would work, like logically. Like, we're inventing the idea of intellectual property now.
Right.
We're the earliest version of any government, and two farmers are coming over and disputing this. Here's the thing: here's how I would think of it. And this is a metaphor, but it's gonna sound very literal, and maybe it is, maybe it's not. If Farmer A came up with the idea and Farmer B came over and physically took the fucking plow or the thing he added to his plow or tractor or whatever, and he brought it home and copied it in its exact design and then walked it back over and placed it back on, that's theft, because there was no permission for that interaction. He had to invade that man's property. He had to take his property in some way, shape, or form and then steal his original idea. That is. Now, if he was like just standing there and he was like, oh, he put a hook on the back of his horse and now he doesn't have to till it himself. That's genius. I'm going to put a hook on the back of my horse. That's not theft, because you're collaborating on an idea. Now, here's where it does come in, is the implement.
When does it shift from an idea to a schematic, for instance? You know what I mean?
And that's what it is when you take your creative ability to implement it into a specific application, you've then registered that as your idea, and it's as important as if you made a table. That's the point, is you're respecting the mind as much as the body, because the mind is what you can't do, though, is you can't trademark, patent, or copyright fucking a philosophy. You know what I mean? Like, don't hit people. That's not intellectual property. That's a fucking idea. Right. That's the second plow analogy. You both put a hook.
But if I wrote a book of philosophy just saying the same thing, I can copyright that.
Well, sort of, is what you can do is, this is where, and I do know a little bit about how some of this stuff works. So, like, think of it this way. In the music industry specifically, you cannot copyright a drum beat or a chord progression, but you can copyright a song, which has a drum beat and a chord progression in it. So they figured out that you can't copyright common information, but you can copyright the effort and energy you put into taking that and creating a new thing, right? Especially when you invest time and money, and that's what it really comes down to.
I understand.
Is like, when we make a record, the reason we have rights to that is because we didn't just play a song. Because here's the deal. Here's how the law works. If you came over to my house and I played a guitar and I went, check out this new song, and I played it for you, I have no legal right, or even technically an ethical right, to say you stole my song. You went home and, first of all, you wouldn't have done that. You'd have heard a vague memory of the melody and chord progression and then done your own thing.
But we've gotten farther than that, because I can take your song and then play it my way and still be sued, right?
Yeah, and that gets muddy. But I'm in its core essence, trying to stick with it simply, like, once I invest money and I record that and I put it on record and I file it and I'm selling that as my product, then originally you can't just plagiarize it just like the book. I can't take it word for word. I can take your philosophy and write my own book on it.
Let's go back to the tractor thing, because you said of competition and so forth, right? In
Yep.
you know, protecting competition. Okay, so now let's say farmer A, he invented something that makes the tractor work better.
Mm-hmm.
And so he now can put all the other farmers out of business. Right?
Well,
No,
is what he would probably do
he
is
can
make
have a
money selling shit to all the other farmers.
He could, but it doesn't have to. He could competitively outprice everybody else out from the market, if provided he had a good business plan, whatever, right?
That's what corporations do.
Right.
So, yeah.
But corporations use government.
Well, they also just price their competition out of the market is what they
being incorporated is government. Like, that's a government
sort of
title,
I guess
right?
I see what you're saying.
So, yeah, because government's always there to protect the wrong people. Sometimes, I mean, I should say always, but it's there to protect the people who control it, right? Or the people that can invest in paying off politicians and so forth, right? And it could even be based off the fact that, if we don't bail out these banks, we'll have collapse. So they're too big to fail, right? But let's say farmer A, so then farmer B says he doesn't have to do anything, but he can look at what's done and go home and take the exact same idea and do the same thing, right? Now he's not selling it, right? So now, is it theft? He took an idea from someone else. He's not selling it. He's not trying to make money off of it. Neither is the other guy. He's just using it to improve.
So look at like Gerald Ford. Look at Henry Ford. He invented the assembly line, but he wasn't able to trademark or copyright the actual assembly line. Is what he was able to do was trademark his version of the assembly line. So Chevy wasn't able to come in and steal the blueprint and just do it exactly like it, but they were able to do an assembly line. And so they were still able to compete in the market because they didn't steal his idea. They took the same philosophy and applied it to their own scenario. So music shit, that shit has gotten muddied lately, and this is why I've been thinking about it, because it's starting to piss me off. So like back in the day, it's 100% clear and obvious that Led Zeppelin stole Stairway to Heaven. Guns N' Roses stole Sweet Child of Mine. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen these videos? It's clear. No, it's so fucking obvious.
I've heard about Led Zeppelin stealing.
They all won. They all won their lawsuits. I believe they all won, and they won because the judge ruled they changed the art enough to call it their own. But now you had Robin Thicke get sued by the Marvin Gaye estate because he admittedly wrote a song that sounded like Marvin Gaye because he wanted to pay homage and pay respect. Didn't steal a song, didn't rewrite a song, didn't take any lyrics from a song. They just figured out how to create. That'd be like me starting a band like Bob Marley, mm-hmm. and then someone suing me from the Bob Marley estate because I sound like Bob Marley. That's not how it fucking works.
No.
You're not supposed to be able to copyright, trademark, or patent a style. What, is Metallica gonna fucking copyright metal? Well, because it's in our name. Fuck off.
Sounds like something Gene Simmons would try to do, right?
Right. But you get where I'm going with it. So, like, it is a very gray area, and it's not a resolved issue. Still to this day, it's a legitimate fucking legal problem going on in the music industry. And like you mentioned, with China stealing intellectual property from Google to Apple. I mean, dude, this is not a black and white argument. It is all gray. All of it.
I just wonder where it's all going. That's my whole thing is, like, we can have government protections, but at some point we have to pay the devil's dues. That's how I kind of feel like it's going to come back to haunt us.
On the intellectual property thing specifically?
That and everything. Every kind of thing that we can look back and say, hey, we've made our life easier by accepting government in this position.
Yep.
Whether it's healthcare or anything. At some point it's going to come back to haunt us.
Yeah. I mean, I agree, because I think the proof is in the pudding. I think every time the government has done something, eventually it just, for them, not everything, right? When the government amends the Constitution and gives everyone the right to vote, that didn't make anything worse, right? When they ended slavery, that didn't make anything worse. However, when they fucking instilled prohibition, that did make things worse. Right. But then when they ended prohibition, that didn't make things worse.
Ending slavery was respecting people based on the Bill of Rights, right? So there should have nothing that should have been changed except for give everybody the Bill of Rights, right?
And we had to go to war for that.
Yeah.
That's the other thing is like that shit didn't happen at the stroke of a pen. That's again when people are like violence solves nothing. Like really? How about every war ever? Like that's the only reason America doesn't have slavery. Maybe not now to this day, maybe eventually, but it happened when it happened. And maybe it happened before people were ready for it, but we literally had to go to war over it.
Well, I think we have slavery in other ways.
Yeah, with the prison system. I mean, it literally says in the Constitution slavery is still legal. That's the other problem I have with it is it says slavery is illegal unless unless you're in jail, and then they can absolutely use you as slave labor. But
then again, I don't know, man.
But there we get back to Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, you know, passing the prison reform act. I think what is it called, like the omnibus bill or some shit like that. Like they want more people incarcerated, and that's why Kamala Harris left it in there because California is one of the biggest users of prison labor.
Yep.
It's like you guys are fucking and I just found out Kamala Harris is also a descendant of a Jamaican slave owner.
Yep.
Like recent. But we're literally taking down fucking state monuments and shit because they owned slaves in a time where it was cool, like 200 years ago, you know what I mean? Or they fought on the wrong side of a war, but now we're about to fucking elect somebody who's a direct descendant of a slave owner. Not very long ago.
It's absurd. Like I said, we've reached this whole level of absurdity where literally we can campaign on, quid pro quo and all this stuff and Russian collusion and Trump grab him by the pussy and all this stuff, but yet then we elect the same kind of people. Isn't Biden guilty of almost all those things too? Quid pro quo.
That's my other favorite one is a year ago.
Sniffing these women, right?
A year ago,
he's
Kamala
got sexual
Harris,
allegations.
Dude, and a year ago, Kamala Harris said she believed Joe Biden's accusers.
Yep.
Because she was going for the presidency on her own, and she was trying to get the feminist Me Too vote. Right? So she's like, no, I believe Biden's accusers. Really, bitch? Because now you're his running mate. So that makes one or two things true about you as a person.
Correct. Yeah.
Either A, you jumped to conclusions, or B, you're a complete fucking hypocrite and you sold out for a chance at power. Pick one. Because either you don't use good judgment and you publicly said you believe his accusers without having enough data, so now you're not even fit to make good judgment calls, or you're a fucking lying whore.
Or what about Biden saying he didn't want his kids going to racial jungles?
Oh yeah, dude.
This stuff, okay,
it's bad, bro.
So my friends who
did you see the video of him dropping N-bombs on the Senate floor back in the 70s?
No, I didn't.
Yep. They scrubbed it from the internet. I found it. I watched it multiple times. It came up during the Obama administration. I'd seen it dozens of times, and I've tried to go find it. It got scrubbed from YouTube. You can't find that video anymore. You'll find it somewhere.
I'll have to. Yeah,
you will find it. It is horrendous.
The thing is I can only go off of what I know he said and what I've seen him say. And that alone shows like with my friends who are anti-Trumpers against everything. So I'm not pro-Trump, right? So everybody makes everything two-dimensional.
I don't think anybody's really pro-Trump. I think people are pro-Trump because they're anti.
But I hate having to have that disclaimer every single time I criticize Democrats.
Right.
I mean, it gets really old. But
I know what you mean.
With my friends who are making excuses for Biden, it's like, but he's a changed person. He's had all this time to change. It's like, oh my God, man. It's like you will give the benefit of the doubt to one side and not the other. The dude could have literally been KKK member. It's okay. I mean,
he was endorsed by a former KKK member.
Senator Byrd, right? He was KKK, right. And you got Hillary saying that he was a mentor and all that. You literally have this stuff so close.
Yep.
But that rule only applies. The forgiveness rule only applies to your party.
There seems to be no forgiveness nowadays.
I just want. I actually
Like that's the thing about the cancel culture is it's a one and done deal.
I want consistency, at least no hypocrisy. At least if you stand on this, I want you to stand on this. I mean,
Like
you could have a nuanced approach.
If
but
you're Bill Cosby or Harvey Weinstein, you should be canceled. But we shouldn't have the ability to just say somebody did something and they immediately lose their fucking job. Like whether I agree with them or not.
I agree. Yep.
You know what I mean? Like I wasn't even for Nick Cannon going down for making his anti-Semitic remarks as a Jew, as a white Jew, I guess you could say. I look white. I don't feel white.
He said some pretty stupid shit.
Dude, he said white people are less than because we lack melanin. He said the Jews were fucking stealing the original African religion. It's like it's all very racist and very preposterous.
And Farrakhan has said weird shit too. And
yeah.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit what people say. I give a shit what people do.
And here's the thing is I want to hear those fucks because I want to know they're there so I can understand the stupid shit being said out there. So when I have children, I can prepare. Here's what you're going to hear. Here's how you handle it. Here's what you say. Here's how you move on. If I don't know that shit is out there,
you have a false
my kids will
sense.
come home thinking some wild shit.
Yeah.
Hey, Dad, somebody just told me that white people are primitive because we grew up in the mountains. Like, what? Now I can be like, oh, yeah. I've heard that too. Here's the thing. Boom. Like, I'm not going to be surprised, right? But when you push these people in a cancel culture to the fringes, to the edge of society, then they only talk in whispers amongst themselves and they get galvanized because they feel like society has alienated them. They've almost been martyred now.
Yeah, well,
and they dig their heels in and only talk to people who think like them. And that's when you get like fucking some weird fucking dark web shit going on. You know, that's how you get cults. That's how you get terrorism. You know, whether it's through physical violence you're doing this. Like,
yeah, and I don't think that you prove those people wrong. Like, I think the way to prove people wrong is through ideas.
And discussion, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which can only be done through free speech.
Those ideas have to be allowed to be discussed in order to truly and organically defeat an idea, right? Yep. You'll never eradicate racism or any of this stuff like that. Yep. But I personally would, obviously I don't want to hear racism everywhere I go. Obviously. Nobody wants to do that. But I also want to know who's a racist, right?
Right.
I personally want. I wouldn't shop at a place I knew some guys are racist. Right?
Dude, have you been seeing this shit on our local friends shit about like people are taking screenshots of crazy discussions, fucking people getting accused of all kinds of wild shit? Every time I click on one of these motherfuckers, I don't know who it is, and it's like nice.
Yeah,
like not once have one of my actual friends.
Yep.
Like been caught in a screenshot.
I've seen
one or two of our friends slightly got me too'd. I'm not going to put names out there. It wasn't even a real fucking issue, but the ones I'm talking about are like real, like they're in Facebook arguments and Messenger saying super racist shit or fucking or like
I want to know
chauvinistic.
I want to know who those people are.
Yeah, and every time I see them, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, nice. Like, I've had a natural ability to avoid complete douchebags. And it's hilarious to me because that's always been something I prided myself on. I'm like, nah, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about him, but fuck that guy. I've never talked to him before in my life, but there's just something greasy about him. He's got a bad energy, whatever you want to call it, right? I'm like, fuck that guy. And then I just avoid him. And years later, that person's getting fucking outed, and I'm like, yeah, fucking sometimes it's like, oh, I've never even heard of that guy. Other times it's like, oh yeah, he's not one of my buddies.
I believe that you know,
or I already blocked him on Facebook because they said some wild shit a year or two ago.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think my whole thing is everything needs to be organic and moral, I guess. Like your solutions need to be thought out. Solutions should always be thought out, right? Rational. And just because if you don't have those things, if we just react and we just try to shut everybody down, we don't want anything, we don't want to see anything, we don't want to hear anything, we don't want to do anything, but yet we want the most dire consequences of people never being able to work at a job again because they said something horrible.
Right.
I mean, it's going way too far.
Yeah, and that's the point is like somebody says something on Twitter and they're fired from their job, which I mean is somewhat understandable, but because it became through public shaming, right? And that's the fucking problem is like, if I make a racist tweet, right? It is not unreasonable for you to take a snapshot of that tweet and send it to my employer and get me fired? Like, I would kind of want to know if one of my employees is running around saying a bunch of racist shit, because whether you're on the clock or not, you're representing my company,
if
right?
they're a reflection of you're a reflection of their business. And I'm not trying to defend a racist.
My point is, where I draw the line is when people take a snapshot out of that tweet and then go put it on Reddit, and then that gets shared virally on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and it becomes a public sensation, and then all of a sudden it gets picked up by the local city pages. Not only does this person now have the same result of losing their job, they've been publicly humiliated, they're probably getting death threats, and now they can never find another job. That's not good for society.
Some of the thing is, with social media, some of us guys will give each other some hard shit.
Yeah.
Die loser or whatever, even though we really don't mean it. But if that screenshot is taken out of context, I mean, do we react on those things? I mean, I personally don't, because somebody could just take a screenshot of something I said, send it to my boss and be like, oh, he said this. Well, yeah, I did say that, but you didn't see the other tweets.
Right, because it's not in context.
Whatever. Yeah. And so to me,
there's an argument. Yeah, and there's an argument to be made, like, but again, these are handled usually when you're hired. And if policies change while you're hired, you're usually briefed. We're updating our policy. Like GC, when I was at Guitar Center, they had a thing like this. Like, here's the deal. We understand you guys are musicians and you say some wild fucking shit. If you're going to do that, do not update your Facebook that Guitar Center is your employer. Okay? We're not going to moderate your speech when you're not on the clock.
Right.
But you do not say stupid fucking wild shit, including using basic swear words, right? Like, oh, you fucking motherfuckers, if you have Guitar Center as your employer. If you're going to have Guitar Center as your employer, that Facebook page is not ours, but it also still represents us. So we're not going to...
You might as well not even have a LinkedIn either.
Right. You know what I mean? So it's like, be very careful, but they were cool about it is what I'm saying. They understood that. So you're going to usually get into that shit. Is where it gets fucked up. Is like, yeah, maybe you and I are talking on Facebook and I say, I'm going to fucking murder you tonight. And somebody sees that and they're like, oh my God. And they call the police. And it's like, no, dude, we're playing Call of Duty tonight. Like, we're scheduled. Yeah. We're going to go play Call of Duty at 8:00 and I'm going to fucking murder Jamal. I'm going to, or even worse, I'm going to fucking terrorize you. I'm going to make you want to quit life. I've texted shit like that to my friends because we're talking about, like, we're going to play Madden football online that night. And I'm like, I'm going to ruin your life, dude. I'm going to terrorize you. Like, I'm going to make you want to end your life. That is not literal. None of that is, we're talking about his football life. We're talking about him pulling out his game and snapping it in half. We're not talking about actual real threats here. So I agree with what you're saying in principle, especially when it's done publicly. That's what I was getting at.
Part of my concern,
because at least if you did it privately, like you said, you have the right and the ability to go, well, yeah, I did say that, but there's context. And then show them the rest of it. When it becomes a media storm and an uproar,
it's too late.
Employers are like, dude, it doesn't matter. Yeah, dude, we've already lost $500,000 on sponsors because of you. Fucking Brian Callen had to take a break from his own podcast because some woman accused him of fucking rape. It didn't happen. I'm telling you, it didn't happen. More information is coming out that it's probably not true at all. It's a false accusation. He's self-employed on his own podcast, and his own fucking sponsors were like, we will not sponsor your podcast if he's on it. And so that's the only way they make money, is by ad placements and shit like that. So it's still the same fucking thing at that point.
And that's voluntary agreement, so you have to take good with bad. So
it's a voluntary agreement, but nobody voluntarily agrees to be falsely publicly accused and have their entire public relation tarnished. I mean, dude, people still, I know you're not the biggest sports guy, but you've heard of Ben Roethlisberger. He got accused of rape. People still call him Ben Rapelessberger. He never did it. She made it up. She was a gold-digging whore who was trying to go after him for money. People still call him a rapist. He never did it. That's fucked up. That guy's got a wife and kids now, and people will still see him in fucking public and call him a racist and a piece of shit in front of his kids. Did his kids ask for that? No. He didn't fucking sign up for that. You know what I mean? Nobody signs up for that, especially if you're not in the public light. For example, the girl, the daughter of the owners of Holy Land, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago made a bunch of fucking racist tweets. She was a teenager, right? And she's trying to be funny and say a bunch of stupid, fucked up shit that all children say,
Mm-hmm.
but it's on Twitter. During the riots just a few months ago, that shit caught on. Fucking boom. She's publicly shamed. City Pages writes an article about it. It goes fucking viral, and they have to fire their own fucking daughter to save their business, dude. Like, if it's that big of a problem, allow them the potential to handle it in-house and just get rid of her. But now, this woman, who knows? She might have fucking committed suicide. And I'm sorry, I don't care how bad a person you are. If we're fucking bullying, and that's the thing, is we talk about cyberbullying. Well, that's all social justice warriors are. They're social justice bullies. They're online bullying. That's exactly what they're doing. And they're ruining fucking lives, dude. Ruining
See,
lives.
like, I'm not opposed to shaming, like a public shaming. I think that's how communities used to work, right? Like you communities.
It doesn't seem ethical, though.
No, it's well, depends. This person freaking hits his wife. Right? Shaming him, being like, oh, he's a wife beater, or whatever. That to me is like, that's something. You're not hurting that person.
Yeah, I suppose you're right. I mean, there's definitely degrees.
For instance, like if you live in a smaller community, right? You know who's doing what and who's doing whatever, right? There's always gonna be shit hits, but you still, like, that shaming had a role, right?
Sure.
It did have, because it was in a way kind of like a nonviolent policing of behavior, I suppose, right?
But shaming is now bad too. Like, you can't slut shame, you can't fat shame, you can't shame
about certain things.
But you can shame you. I can shame you for being a cisgendered white male.
Oh, I could be blamed for anything.
But I can't. But I can't shame you
but
for being fat, right? I can't shame you for being a slut, right? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
These are all the hypocrisies of the left. Like, we can shame you for all of these things, but not these things. Sex work is real work. I actually agree with that one. That's I'm so libertarian.
It's voluntary.
Like,
It's voluntary.
As long as it's voluntary, right? Yeah. I'm not okay with it when pimps are fucking drugging women, getting them to be addicts, and then hoeing them out. I'm not okay with sex trafficking, but like how Nevada did it, there's a great example of where government did something right for once. They realized it's happening, we can't stop it, and the best thing we can do to protect people is to actually regulate sex work. These women need to have regular tests. We're not going to allow them to have like fucking bona fide pimps. They're going to pay taxes. They're going to do this the right way.
Let's be real. Government was not being altruistic in any of sense or form in what goes on in Nevada.
No, they wanted their cut. They wanted their chunk of the money. But it's still better than illegal prostitution.
You realize that state is mostly owned by the government?
What do you mean? Like the federal government?
80% of it. Yeah, I mean, it's...
Or the state government?
State government.
Like, I mean, a lot of it's municipally owned, is what you're saying?
It's not there.
Except for like the heart of Vegas and shit,
property
right?
is zero, you know what I mean?
Like Vegas has a lot of private property, but that's corporate private property.
If you look at the what percentage of the country of that
I'll have
state
to check
is owned
into
by
that.
the government, it's like 80%. It's
Really?
it's an interesting state in that fact. It's definitely
interesting. Versus like a Wyoming, which owns nothing, or a Montana, which is like they own nothing.
So what goes on in Vegas? There's nothing altruistic about.
I'm not saying altruistic, but I'm saying not leaving that one completely up to the free market, because, like, for example, sex work, when you completely leave the government out of that, you get really horrific prostitution and exploitation. You get sex trafficking, and that's not cool. Everybody understands that's not cool. That's one example where you just can't trust people to do it the ethical way. It's just not a fucking thing. Like, it's never going to happen.
I personally don't. I don't trust anybody anyway.
But look at what's going on with the sex work in Nevada, and then look at how it handles everywhere else. By non-government regulation, that's a situation where it actually is worse without government oversight. I wouldn't say intervention, but oversight.
Well, it's also worse in areas where government made it illegal.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, because it is illegal. The regulations aside, doesn't even matter when it's completely illegal, you know?
Yeah, but...
Because if it's illegal, why not just kidnap someone and make them a sex slave? If everything's illegal, why not? It's just illegal.
Yeah, but...
You're already breaking one set of rules.
But just decriminalizing and making it legal isn't necessarily going to fix that, because, again, you can just... What I'm specifically talking about is like either the human trafficking, like you mentioned, or like you get a woman hooked on heroin and then you pimp her out so she can get her fix. Like just making prostitution legal won't fix that problem. But if somebody wants to legitimately be a sex worker because it pays well and the government comes in and regulates it with the STD test and all the other shit, now there's a clean regulated market that consumers are going to be into, or at least have the option, and that by itself
I think
will get rid of a lot of the really dirty shit.
I don't think government solely owns that solution. I think the free market would also be able to offer, if you let, I like how we're talking about this now, but like if you offer an alternative to a back alley place, for the same thing with abortion, right? The argument for abortion, you're going to get a better thing, whether it's regulated or not. You're offering an open environment and let competitors compete. It is now behoven. They're like really want to make sure you don't go to Fred's down the road, you know, and go to my place instead. I have cleaner women, right? Or whatever, or cleaner, cheaper, whatever, blah, 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 right? You're going to compete for the quality.
The only thing that helps with the government regulation is like, it's like health code violations for restaurants. Like if you have good regulation, and that's the real key, is like good and efficient regulation and oversight, then it gives the consumer a level of trust, because we know I can just claim my women are the cleanest, and then all of a sudden fucking 50 guys get herpes, and then I just shut down shop and move down the road. I mean, this happens in construction all the time. They call it the taillight warranty. These guys show up, they fucking do a bunch of work, it looks decent, and then they dip out of your town, and then you go to make a warranty claim, you call them, that company's not only not around, but that guy declared bankruptcy and then just opened up a new business, right? So like having some sort of regulation where there's a certification and inspections and things like that, it gains the ability for the consumers to have trust, which ultimately really does benefit the free market. It allows the free market to have fair competition, right? Because it's all about equality of opportunity. We're making sure that we're all on the same fucking baseball field here. That's the idea. The problem is when the government regulation kicks in so far and starts changing the landscape of the field,
who could do business and who can't,
and how easy it is. That's when we have a problem, right? So it's like, fuck, man, there is no right or wrong to any of this. We know that a lack of government is complete anarchy in the Wild West. We did that once. It didn't go well, right? Like, we know, we're seeing it now, and we've seen examples in the past. Too much government control is horrible. So I think that's why people now kind of have been talking about like Make America Great Again, and like even the people on the other side are nostalgic for a Bill Clinton, or even just going right back to Barack Obama. It's like people had it, everything seemed more reasonable, and it seemed like there was more balance back then because things were more of a level playing field. But the farther and farther we go down this path of the Great American Experiment, it's almost like we ended up where we started, which is you basically have the royal rich elites running everything. You call it an oligarchy, call it an aristocracy, call it whatever the fuck you want, but it definitely doesn't feel like the same thing we originally started out on. And I think it's both sides. I think it's free market exploitation, because if you're a corporation, if you're a capitalist, your only moral obligation is to make money. You know what I mean? If you're a corporation, it's in the DNA. There's no moral or ethical bounds other than to make money. That's the sole purpose of a corporation, is to be profitable and make money. But on the socialistic side too, it's like giving the government any more control or power has never fucking actually made anything truly better.
No, we still have one in 5 children in poverty.
Yeah, except for a couple tiny examples. We brought up the DNR, which does a fair job. We brought up, like legalizing the sex work in Nevada. Like, they definitely don't have the same sex trafficking problems as other states. I mean, it's just a fact. It's a verifiable fact. If you legalize drugs and regulate like heroin and oxycodone and shit like that, that's where government, not intervention, because the intervention is making it illegal in the first place, but allowing it to be regulated safely. And then junkies in other countries have proven they would much rather go to the hospital where a doctor administers
even
it.
Just decriminalizing those things have made differences in other countries.
Yeah, specifically what I'm talking about is going even past decriminalization and legalization, which is like sanctioning, right? So it's like they let the methadone clinic and doctors administer heroin, and junkies have already shown they would rather go to the hospital and have their heroin administered by a doctor because they know it's safe, immediately stopping overdoses, immediately defunding cartels and other criminal organizations, because junkies don't want to go sit in that fucking shit-infested fucking shooting gallery. They don't want to do that. They do it because it's the only place they can. And one by one, those people eventually weaned themselves off heroin by going and getting good, clean, regulated heroin per health regulations from the government and shit like that. They eventually fucking kicked it. Most of them eventually got off of it. You know what I mean? Like, it works, but it's not just getting rid of the government.
Driving people to methadone clinics.
Yeah, it doesn't work here. It doesn't work here.
Yeah,
it doesn't work here because it's not the same thing. We're giving them methadone. They don't need methadone. They need heroin, because methadone doesn't actually help you do anything. It's basically synthetic heroin.
Well, I've seen it helps. I've seen people get off of it. I've seen it help people, and I've seen it be a crutch. I think it is a case by case basis.
Everyone I know that's done methadone therapy eventually just full on relapses.
And who knows?
They're either on heroin or they're on methadone.
There's thoughts that mushrooms might help.
Yep.
Right. That might actually help.
Ibogaine is the biggest one that has legit results, scientifically already proven, but it's again just not legal yet. But yeah, psilocybin, MDMA, a lot of those things, because it's about rewiring the neurological pathways.
Well, I think that it comes down to the individual anyway, because some people kick things without anything, and some people will never kick it. I think. Yeah, I don't know that there's a one. I don't know that methadone is a negative or a positive in this situation.
Yeah, I meant more
there's definitely money.
I meant more our way of doing it isn't working. That's what I meant. Like, because they have methadone clinics in other countries and it works a lot better than ours. Our way of dealing with drugs and the drug problem are just literally counterproductive. They make everything worse. Because again, it's the exact same concept of like deplatforming people, censoring people, canceling people. You push them to the fringes of society where there is no light, there is no regulation,
and they're more likely to get the shitty drugs that kill them,
or the shitty information, or the shitty influences that steer them down a bad path. That's how you make a terrorist, right? You alienate them from everyday society, and they go find some crazy fucking cult, and then some demented fuck sees a weakened, broken youth and fucking brainwashes them, turns him into a fucking extremist. It's a formula. And that's what happens on any of these analogies, whether we're canceling people, whether we're fucking bombing a country, it doesn't matter. It all has the same result. Same thing with the war on drugs. You make drug addicts, you make drug dealers, you make aggressors, you make victims, you put everybody in the fucking system. It's justice. And none of it's worked. None of it has fucking worked. So let me ask you this, because I got to fucking take a monster leak here. We've been going 2.5 hours, so we'll start wrapping this up here pretty soon. Let me ask you this. So I wave a magic wand. Boom. I knight the Jordan. Fucking sorry, dude. I knight the Jamal Carlson. I was thinking about the neighbor kid. His name's Jordan. Because he did that to me the other day. He was like, I knight thee. That's where that came from. Yeah. So Jamal, I knight the solver of our current problem. And I know you don't have all the answers, but if you had just one step, let's say you're the knight of fixing, and you go, I got one rule I can make that's just going to make everything immediately either better or easier or more simple, or really, because those are even kind of abstract, like less chaos. What would it be? Because I'm not going to ask you to fix everything. That's unreasonable.
And nor do I want to fix everything. I don't believe that a world should be free of consequence or pain or suffering or anything like that, because suffering is life, right? We suffer, we life. The guy who writes an awesome blues song suffered, right? We get so much thing from suffering. The minute you're born, you're suffering. Something hurts, right?
True.
So like you can't get rid of that, and so to even pretend that you could, But to me, what I guess, if I could fix everything, it would be just having people, abide by the non-aggression principle.
Sure.
Right? Just if it involves force upon peaceful people, let's not do it.
That makes sense.
That's my whole thing,
and both sides are violating that vehemently right now.
Right. And it's really easy to do. It's really easy to do when you feel you're justified.
Mm-hmm.
Same with this, like straight up lynching somebody did something wrong, right?
Right.
Like I can go and do something. I can go beat up that guy who hit that woman, right? Or we could have due process.
Right.
Right. It feels really good to just immediately do something horrible to somebody if we feel justified.
Right.
And you don't want to wait for due process. You don't want to do the non-aggression principle, the least amount of aggression possible to solve a problem. If we could just do that, we could stop being hypocrites.
For
right?
sure.
Because to me, that's the biggest thing is like I see both. I don't see conservatives being conservative. I don't see, liberals being the liberals that they used to be. I don't see any. I think they're all hypocrites now.
Right.
They don't. I mean, you can look at it. They're two candidates right now. If you can say, oh, one treats women like shit. Well, what about the other one? The other one's got allegations too.
Yep.
Right? So no matter what you do, you're voting. You can't just sit there and concentrate and circle the wagons on one candidate and not the other.
Yep.
If we put principles ahead of everything, we could solve a lot more problems.
Yeah. And don't talk to me about police brutality and then elect a vice president who was a cop and wanted to lock fucking parents up for truancy violations.
And who still wants to continue the drug war.
Yep. And somebody who wants to take your right away to defend you. Like, nah.
Yeah,
hard pass.
Somebody's not going to get a vote from me, and somebody wants to perpetuate the drug war.
Yep. That's a big one for me too. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing is like, I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I'm either not voting or I'm voting for Joe Jorgensen. I'll probably vote for Joe Jorgensen again. I voted for Gary Johnson. I'll probably do that because I don't like I don't like just not voting. But at the same time, it's like maybe I will this time. Maybe I'll vote down ballot.
I don't know if I don't know. I don't know what I'm voting right now.
Well, let's fucking wrap it up, dude. I gotta take it. We've been going for 2.5 hours anyways. And I'm sure nobody wants to fucking constantly see a 4-hour podcast from me pop up. But dude, we're gonna do it again.
Right,
you were on, we didn't even mention this last time. You were on the first round.
Yep.
But I mentioned this a few times on the podcast. I canned that because I didn't execute it the way I wanted. I didn't like the podcast as I was doing it. So we rebooted. So Jamal came on a while back. No one ever heard it. So he'll be on again. If you guys like this, like, subscribe, hit the bell. Where can people follow
shit,
you?
I don't care.
Yeah, or yeah. I mean, like, I guess you guys can downvote it and dislike it if you want, but that actually does hurt my numbers if you do that. Yeah. So
you can
like, subscribe, hit the bell. Where can people follow you if they want to check you out or check out your music?
Right now, current music, not involved in a band, so that's not legit. But
Emergent, it's just
you can still find Emergent on everything.
iTunes. Yeah. I'll see if I can find a link. What about your social? Do you have anything you want people to follow, like an Instagram or anything?
I'm not even on Twitter, or if I did, I set up an account and never did anything with
Gotcha.
it. So
all right.
I'm invisible.
If you guys want to follow me, everything's Jared Singer Live, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that shit. Like, subscribe, hit the bell. Fucking thanks for doing this. Let's do it again,
Thanks
man.
for having me.
It was a blast.